across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome. It is the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow, of course, at 10 o'clock. Lots to get through. We are, of course, responding to events on Bondi Beach in Australia yesterday. Two gunmen, father and son, setting out to essentially just kill Jewish people. That was the only intention, and 15 people have lost their lives. A girl as young as 10, British-born rabbi, retired police officer, Holocaust survivor are among those who perished. How does the West respond to Islamist terror? Straightforward question, and we'll open the lines on that now. Elsewhere and in other news, hundreds of shoplifters could evade justice after a legal ruling that hampers private prosecutions, ministers have warned. A specialist London team of major retailers have been arresting and prosecuting offenders with private bobbies, securing banning orders. But this model is now at risk. How? How is it at risk? And why? We'll have more on that. And the 5-day doctors' strike in England will go ahead from 7 o'clock on Wednesday morning after BMA members voted to continue despite a new government offer. Ministers warn patients will be at risk amidst intense hospital pressure, of course, from the winter wave of flu. Nothing unusual about a winter wave of flu, but when you haven't got medics to treat people, there's a problem. Some 83% apparently backed the walkout in an online poll over the weekend. We'll have more on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. You can leave a voice note there as well. And of course you can message 87222. How does the West respond to Islamist terror? It's always, by definition, horrific, disturbing, whatever words you want to pick when we see a story like this. What I suppose saddens us, and we don't want to be conditioned into any sense of normality, is that living in this country, we know these things do happen. We aren't as surprised, perhaps, as we once were. Oh, it's another one of those. 15 people declared dead, more injured. Australia's worst terror attack. This was barbaric and as callous as you can imagine. In terms of its aim, it had all the echoes of October 7th, innocent members of the public, a celebratory setting, a mixture of young and old, and Jewish people. The first day of Hanukkah, and events held every year in this particular place, and of course the gunman knew this. The most innocent of scenarios seems to almost add to the appetite of those who are intent on death and carnage. These people, of course, believe that a God is their protector, told them to do it. They did it in the name of a version of their faith. They are truly signed up to the medieval death cult that is political Islamism. Globalise in the intifada, that word. You've heard it, kill the Jews worldwide. This has been chanted on the streets of the UK and elsewhere across the world since October the 7th. We shouldn't be surprised at that. But of course we remember and we mourn the death of the innocents on a story such as this and on a day such as today. Authorities confirming a 10-year-old girl, two rabbis, a Holocaust survivor. The legacy, of course, is that this does fundamentally change how people live and function. There are Hanukkah festival commemorations going on daily right now. Synagogues that will be upping their security because of mad ideologues that have wedded themselves to a death cult and literally believe it is their work to do this. We can talk forever about how mental and disturbed and horrendous and horrific and depraved and awful these people are. It doesn't get us anywhere. And don't be lighting candles and singing Kumbaya, because we know that doesn't get us anywhere either. But it does beg the question that we come up with every single time. How does the West respond to Islamist terror? Of course, this is not a big army of people who live over there and you can spot them on a map. This is, of course, a collection of individuals sometimes. This was a father and son who, curiously, had a stash of legal weapons. What's interesting about that, as I'm sure you heard with Julia, the son in this case, Naveed Akram, did actually come to the attention of the Australian spy agencies in 2019 over concerns that he'd been radicalised by an IS leader. They had a 6-month investigation by the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, and he was not deemed an imminent threat to the public. We sort of often hear this story, don't we? That one or two of the people involved were or had been of interest to the various authorities, but then nothing happens. I would suggest that if you've come across the radar of the security services, and there clearly was at some point a reason to believe that you might be trouble, you might be a problem, then I don't think that's a list you should ever be coming off, certainly not anytime soon. 0344 499 1000. How does the West respond to this? Let's get a word on this story and the other big stories of the day. Reem Ibrahim is back with us, Communications Officer at the Institute for Economic Affairs. Good afternoon to you, Reem. Nice to see you. This is, of course, a terribly distressing story. It doesn't, as I said at the beginning, really surprise us in a curious kind of way. How bad is that we're not that surprised when we hear of these attacks? Just before we speak on this, let's have a listen to Anthony Albanese, the Australian Prime Minister, his response at that press conference to the events of Bondi Beach.
An attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on every Australian, and every Australian tonight will be, like me, devastated on this attack on our way of life. There is no place for this hate, violence and terrorism in our nation. Let me be clear, we will eradicate it. Amidst this vile act of violence and hate will emerge a moment of national unity, where Australians across the board will embrace their fellow Australians of Jewish faith at this dark moment for our nation.
More than 50 shots rang out in under 10 minutes. I mean, this was, if you're a terrorist, Reem, I mean, this is open season. Right? You literally look over a vantage point with hundreds of people sitting in a park. I mean, you can't, to be crass about it, if you're looking for a target, you're going to get one.
It's so awful, it's so tragic, and I just think that, the most shocking part about all of this is how easy it was for those individuals to then go and attack those people. And the fact that this is a very small Jewish community, this is a community that is generally quite peaceful. They're about to celebrate Hanukkah. They are celebrating the start of Hanukkah, which is extraordinarily important to the Jewish community. And I remember reading a piece in The Sun, it was Noah Hoffman, who actually grew up in the area, who said, it's the same situation. It was a very peaceful community where Jewish people would go on their jogs and they would go and celebrate and go to the synagogue, and it was completely brought down by these absolutely disgusting human beings. And I just think part of the problem is, you're right, we haven't been particularly shocked by this because the Jewish community have been warning about this for years. Ever since October 7th, we know that this has happened to quite a few places, and I think it's one of the most abysmal situations we could be in.
What is the answer, though? I mean, in terms of the question that we put out, how would should the West respond to Islamist terror? And of course, the problem is, as I said in the intro there, it's not as if it's an army that sort of is based at this HQ and you can go, well, that's where they all are. These are so often random attacks. They're individuals. They are radicalised in whatever way or form, invariably online. So you don't really know where the next one is going to spring from, which, of course, doesn't make us indefensible, but it kind of hints at that.
It does. It's really difficult, and I think that part of it is these government schemes are clearly completely inadequate. I mean, the fact that somebody like, for example, Axel Republicano, who committed the Southport murders, was referred to prevent 3 times in the UK, right? So these sort of schemes, the fact that one of the gunmen, again, was potentially being investigated or at least being referred to is part of that. And I think part of the problem is that we haven't got those restrictions and we haven't been able to investigate people correctly.
Does having, we've seen the kind of almost the anti-Israel marches take place on for a while on a weekly basis, thousands of people out there chanting, globalise the intifada, things like that. Nothing much happens about that. Now, look, if you didn't have those marches, I don't for one second think we would be sitting here saying there's never going to be another terror attack.
No.
They're not necessarily correlated, but it does sort of give a sense of whether we've got things upside down in terms of how we deal with people who are hell-bent on causing the West terror and destruction.
The problem is we don't view people as human beings, and I think this is the real problem here. When we're talking about these conversations and talking about whatever is going on in the Middle East, that has absolutely nothing to do with the very, very human beings that are living in the West, or indeed those innocent people that were celebrating Hanukkah in Australia. Those people are human beings, and unfortunately, Ian, a lot of the conversations online, at least that I've seen, from a lot of the pro-Palestine activists have been, well, yes, it's very sad those 15 people have died, but what about the thousands of children in Gaza? Now, of course, two wrongs don't make a right.
Correct.
But my God, what compels you to make the comparison? What kind of a human being do you have to be to say, actually, you know, this particular wrong is equated to another wrong? All human life is sacred. Every time a person dies, it is a tragedy. And I think that any conversation that we're having about this needs to be rooted in our understanding for humanity. Now, of course, the debates at the moment in the West have become extraordinarily toxic. Extraordinarily toxic. People saying that Jewish life is not valuable, or people saying that Palestinian life is not valuable, or that a pro-Palestine march is, you know, should be illegal. All of those conversations I don't think are rooted in our understanding that we are all human beings.
And you'd think if you were someone who, you know, had this ideology and you'd looked at, you know, if you took that sort of pro-Palestinian, even if you were pro-Hamas position, you were absolutely outraged by the death of children and innocents in Gaza, then what would then make you go, so I tell you what I'm going to do to show how outraged I am, I'm going to go and do the very same thing.
No,
I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
The problem is, I think the majority of people, the majority of these so-called pro-Palestine activists would not condone the actions of these horrendous people, but they don't criticise the behaviour that led to that kind of action, if that makes sense. So I think most people would say, no, like, murder is bad, do not kill people, and this is a senseless act of complete disgust. But I don't think that those people necessarily get to the conclusion where actually when you're looking at these people and you're saying all Zionists are evil, or you are saying that Jewish people themselves are somehow to blame for what the Israeli government is doing in the Middle East, they have nothing to do with one another, like literally nothing to do with one another. When you're making those claims, you are fueling the emotion and the behaviour that leads to these kind of actions. I also think part of it is that, so the absolute hero that tackled one of the gunmen, Ahmed al-Ahmed, all of the conversations online have been about what faith he is. Is he a Muslim? Is he Christian? I'm just like, why do we hate each other so much that we have to ask ourselves...
Depending on what view, I need to know his religion before I can form a view.
Exactly. What is going on? Can we not just say this man, his name is Ahmed al-Ahmed, he is a hero, he tackled those gunmen, he's saved however many lives. Does it matter if he is a Muslim or if he is Christian? Does that matter? Why do we hate each other so much?
We will continue to take your calls on this. How does the West respond to Islamist terror? 0344 499 1000. We will, Reem, look at a couple of other stories as well. Down to Crowborough in Sussex, where on Sunday, for the 6th straight week in a row, there's been a protest against plans to house 600 migrant men at an army barracks, around about 100 due to be relocated from a closing Kent camp. There's been talks about the town being divided, but one councillor disagrees on this. Let's have a listen.
This town has been reported in the press as being divided. Can we just have a show of hands and some noise in this room to prove that we are not divided about this issue? Just today, there was 3 people in Lewis Crown Court, all of whom were part of your asylum programme, and they brutally raped a woman on Brighton Beach on October the 4th. I do not want that in Crowborough, and I want your assurance that you'll take personal responsibility for anything that happens in this town as a result of what you're doing.
That was one speaker at that meeting in November. And I think the point he has, which is the point I keep coming back to, is I have no, I was talking to somebody at the weekend about this, I have no truck with understanding that most people who come across a boat are not a rapist or a terrorist. The problem is it's a game of roulette, Reem. We don't know who is who. And if you're inviting people in, and many will come from countries where there is a possibility you might have sympathies elsewhere, then it's a very real issue. If you're going to put 600 blokes and somebody goes, right, can you guarantee all of those 600 blokes, what do you know about their background? Nothing at all. What do you know about where they came? Not really much at all. We think they came from this country. They might have told us a lot. We don't know.
Yeah, this is.
And that's where we're at the
exact
moment.
Point. We don't know who these people are. 40,000 people arrived on small boats this year. I mean, it is
700 on Saturday.
It's insane. I mean, we went 28 days without a single person crossing it, and of course, part of it is due to the weather conditions, and. People were saying, you know what, perhaps we've actually come to a situation in which we are starting to see a slowdown. But no, every single winter we see that happen. And the fact that over the weekend, slightly better weather, about 10 degrees, and we have 700 people come. The problem is, and look, I am very pro-immigration, generally speaking. I think that if people want to come to this country and work and contribute, they absolutely should be allowed to do so. So I just want to start with that. But quite frankly, when we're in a situation where taxpayers are being forced to foot the bill for thousands of people coming illegally to the United Kingdom, people are saying enough is enough. And I think that what's happening in this particular area is interesting, because these are people that are being moved from the army barracks over in Kent and being moved over. And they're saying, we do not want this. And the media spin is, oh, well, it's division. No, it's not division. Clearly, people do not want this. And we've seen this happen across the country, where you have people from across the world who we have no idea who they are, the majority of whom are probably fine. But as you've said, it is roulette. We don't know who they are. They've thrown away their documents. They've thrown away exactly all of the information that we could possibly obtain to know who they are. And they've said, I'm here to claim asylum. To be clear, if you are leaving France, a safe country, I have no sympathy. You are clearly an economic migrant. Great, this country is great. People want to come and work. Go through the safe and legal routes.
Yep,
go through the safe and legal routes. There are plenty out there. There are plenty of ways to enter the United Kingdom. It is incredibly easy if you think about it when it comes to trying to gain those job offers. And actually, if you are leaving France, which is a safe country, and you enter the United Kingdom illegally, I just quite simply think the rule of law is the rule of law. There are people that have worked extremely hard to come here legally. They are being basically shafted as a result of illegal migration. And I think that that's an extraordinary position to be in.
Reem, stay with us. More comment coming from you as well. 0344 499 1000. You can leave a voice note there too. 87222 if you're messaging us. 1:20. This is Talk.
and some of these tropes, these anti-Semitic tropes, which I think we'd all thought had gone away with the end of the Nazis in 1945, are suddenly there in large parts of our communities, and they need to be tackled head-on. And we need to have actually people standing up to them right across the board and saying that this is wrong and what's being put forwards, and this sort of bastardised ideology is wrong, and this hatred is wrong. And I think it's really important that we recognise that across the board.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 23 minutes after 1 o'clock. Reem Ibrahim is with us from the IEA. Let's have a look at this story, Reem. It's about shoplifters back on the agenda again, and hundreds of them could evade justice after a legal ruling that's going to hamper private prosecution. So a specialist London team working for some of the major retailers has actually been catching and prosecuting offenders. They've had sort of private bobbies, as it were, arresting thieves and securing banning orders and things like that. But the ruling threatens this approach. And of course, it was Keir Starmer who said he was going to crack down on shoplifting. Let's have a listen to what the Prime Minister thinks.
So today I'm putting shoplifters on notice. You might get away with it under this weak Tory government. But if Labour takes power, we won't stand by while crime takes over our streets. We'll put 13,000 extra neighbourhood police on the beat. We'll scrap the shoplifters' charter, the £200 rule that stops the police investigating theft in your workplace. And we'll legislate to make sure assaulting and abusing shop workers is a standalone criminal offence, because you deserve to feel safe at work.
And one of the problems, of course, here, Reem, is that, obviously a lot of those shoplifters thought, well, if we call the police, if we are able to get a police officer out, it's going to take time. And then when you put it through the system, it could be 12 months, 2 years before somebody comes up in front of the correct court. This is a Court of Appeal ruling that requires private prosecutors to offer cases to the police and the CPS before court. So it somewhat scuppers the idea of some of these retailers going, look, we're going to take responsibility ourselves and sort this, and now that may be a problem.
Yeah, so in England and Wales, we're talking about 529,000 shoplifting offences every single year. But the British Retail Consortium is saying, the real number is much higher. They're saying it's about 20 million. It's extraordinary. Britain has become so extraordinarily lawless, I think, and part of it is these smaller crimes that we feel as though perhaps, we're not talking about, murder and things like that, which actually have gone down, but smaller crimes, phone theft, shoplifting, things like that, which feels more visible to people, that is going up, and I think that is really quite worrying for a lot of people across the country. Now, this is really interesting. I think the libertarian in me is loving this story because it's a perfect example of something working really well in the private sector. So these are private prosecutions where you can take them to court. You're much more likely to get a prosecution. There was a particular guy that was interviewed in this Telegraph piece that we were looking at that was saying that, we get 100% conviction rates. We're able to use private funding. These are shops that are actually funding this work themselves, so it's not, taxpayer funded in that respect. And they are able to find these people that are committing these crimes and prosecute them and actually get them convicted. And the CPS is saying, oh no, we've got to get involved, even though they said shops also should be able to step up. So in one sentence they're saying shops should step up, and then when shops do step up, they are taking away their right to step up. It's insane. It's an absolutely insane situation that we're in. And part of the problem is, clearly the CPS are failing to look at any of these. Half the time police don't even show up when you call for a shoplifting offence. And so these shops are then taking matters into their own hands. And then they're saying, oh God, this makes us look really bad because we're not doing anything about this. So hold on, you've got to then bring them to us before you're able to prosecute yourself. It's absolutely extraordinary. And I think part of the problem is government not realising that actually if things are going badly and if crime is not being prosecuted, people and businesses will just take matters into their own hands, and you should let them. They are often far more likely to get them prosecuted. They are far more likely to look at these things. And this reminds me of there's a podcaster called Peter McCormack, and he's like set up private like police around his local area because he's just sick and tired of there being so many, for lack of a better word, drug addicts on the streets that are making his hometown feel less nice. And he's gone and taken matters into his own hands. This particular problem, I think, is fascinating because it's the government saying, we know you guys are like doing our jobs for us, but we're just going to take it back and we'll do a worse job. Yeah. It's insane.
It's insane. Shall we finish on a lighter story?
Yes.
I like this. It's a YouGov poll of 2,000 voters who've revealed. So the question was, who would Father Christmas, Santa Claus, whatever you like, who would Santa vote for if he could? Should we put it that way? And the YouGov poll reveals that 2,000 plus voters revealed a third think that Father Christmas would support the Green Party if there was a general election tomorrow. This is absolute festive nonsense, I have to say. Father Christmas is the absolute epitome of capitalism, epitome of self-responsibility. He employs people, like all those elves and stuff like that.
And they work very hard.
They work very hard. They clearly get good tips and perks because they fly around the world and do stuff. They've got a magic sleigh. I mean, how many businesses offer that kind of thing? A magic sleigh from Father Christmas. It's snowy, there's nice fires going on, they party, they get presents, and they get little tips and mince pies and cookies and stuff left for them. So, I mean, life is good. He's absolutely not a Green Party.
And
where
I don't
are
think
they
he cares
getting this
much
from?
about the environment if he's on that sleigh all night. I mean, that is clearly an environmental hazard, so he's definitely not going to be a Green Party voter.
Well, is it because they reckon the sleigh isn't, fueled by petrol?
No, it's fueled by magic, that's true.
It's fueled by magic. But then...
Not big oil.
Reindeer, yes. You see, your reindeer, they obviously have to do their, attend to their ablutions.
The animal rights activists in the Green Party wouldn't allow that, would they?
I mean, that's animal exploitation in some respects.
Yeah.
I mean,
clearly they enjoy it. This is the thing, it's the magic of Christmas. I was actually having this debate the other day. Someone was saying, we should just completely ban reindeers from Christmas markets. It's inhumane. And we always get this from animal rights activists. They don't like fun. They think that all animals should just be wild and therefore they can never have fun, and they'd probably ban all zoos as well.
Yeah.
So part of the problem is that. And I think that it's beautiful that, that Santa has his sleigh and he has all of the wonderful reindeers. I think he definitely wouldn't be a Green Party voter.
And he's got his business model tuned to such a fine art. He only works one day a year. I mean, surely that is a template for everybody to look at,
eating.
Which is brilliant. Among Conservative voters, 27% thought Santa had faith in Kemi Badenoch. Reform UK voters were more convinced that Santa would secretly be worried about migration. Nearly half thought he would vote for Nigel Farage.
I love this. I think he'd probably be a bit of a conservative, I don't think he's quite anti-establishment enough to be a Reform voter.
Yeah.
I think he's probably a good old-fashioned
He's an old-fashioned Tory,
He's an old-fashioned Tory.
He's old-fashioned Tory.
Big capitalist, but, not quite anti-establishment enough to be pro-Nigel Farage.
And, of course, he believes in benevolence and, hence the reason why he gives away so many gifts.
But it's voluntary. Crucially, look, people always think, you're a big capitalist, you don't believe in charity. No. We believe in charity. We believe in lots of charity.
Yes.
But it's voluntary.
It's voluntary.
Taxation is theft.
Yeah.
Charity is voluntary.
Indeed. And it's a bit old-fashioned because Mrs Christmas stays at home and bakes cakes in the kitchen, doesn't she?
What a life.
Yeah.
What I would do to have the life of Mrs Claus.
I have never understood in the 21st century why people go, but years ago women were just housewives. I mean, seriously.
No, I mean, that's enormous.
That's an enormous job.
But it also isn't even true.
I love that job.
Women have worked throughout history. I mean, the idea that women started working after the Second World War is just not true. There are like business cards of female entrepreneurs from the 18th century, in London saying, here is my shoemaking service. Women have always worked throughout history.
I'm afraid that's actually fake news. I can tell you the first woman to work in this country was in 1993. It's that recent. What about that?
That's not true. Oh, you're terrible. Women have always worked, and Christmas is a beautiful time. But I've got to say, I think women these days, I mean, a lot of the sort of conservative Gen Z movement are saying, you know what, I want to go back to the 50s, don't have to work, and just stay at home and cook and bake cookies. I quite like that idea.
I don't know. Yeah, I've never understood why that's such a terrible thing.
Yeah.
And as we work in, or, you know, we exist in a more kind of pressured environment for lots of reasons, the idea that you can, you know, put your feet up for a little bit, be indoors in the warmth in the winter and in the garden in the summer.
And have loads of babies.
Yeah, what's wrong with doing the shopping in some... I love cooking. I don't even mind a trip to Tesco as long as it's, you know, not too crowded.
No, I'm obsessed with these videos online of people home growing their food and saying, you know what, the best, you know, you don't know what pesticides or GMOs or whatever is in the supermarket. Grow your own food at home, and you don't have to have a big garden to do it. You can get those sort of plant things that you can sort of see. Oh, it's so cool. Yeah. It's so cool.
Doing all of that.
You know what the ideal world would be? If I could just like get married and have loads of children, bake cookies and grow loads of vegetables in the garden and be completely self-sufficient. That would be beautiful.
Would you have a goat?
I would love to have a goat.
Yeah.
I would love to have a goat. I'd love to have a goat and a cow and a sheep, and I'd love to have like my own chickens that I could feed. Oh, that'd be great. I've got a friend in America that actually does that.
Really?
They are like completely self-sufficient, and you know, in America it's a lot easier to live that kind of lifestyle.
See,
than in the UK.
I love all of that. Anyway, which brings us back to the fact that Father Christmas is a Tory.
He's a Tory.
There you go. Reem, thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Reem Ibrahim, excuse me, with us here on the programme. Back to you and back to that pressing question as well. Lots more to come. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
From Tim, who says, I served for 10 years protecting this country and you from invasion, attack and any other military risk, yet we now allow anyone into the country with no sufficient checks. Why did I bother? I'm reminded of the 100-year-old former soldier that we played a clip of that when he made that very point, didn't he, about a month ago. He was on, I think it was around Remembrance Sunday, around about that time, and he was saying, you know, was it worth it? And he said no. Which is interesting. Chris in Surrey says, if we want to show strength and prove the Jewish people that we to prove to the Jewish people we are serious, let's start with rounding up the 427 people reportedly on a watch list. These people are known to be planning terror attacks. Why are we putting up with their presence? Round them up, incarcerate and deport. If they hate our Western values so much, they can live in Iran or Syria or Afghanistan or under the mullahs and the Taliban, etc. The difficulty that, and Chris, thank you very much indeed for that. I think there's even more people on the, I suppose there's gradients of watch list, not to in any way cheapen the seriousness or reduce the seriousness of what those lists are all about. But I've certainly heard figures that are higher than that. A lot of this is homegrown terrorism, of course. You know, whether somebody's family or grandparents originate from elsewhere. We so often, and we've seen it in this country, 7/7 is an obvious example, where these were Brits that were carrying out the attack. They might not have been very British by definition, but in terms of, you wouldn't be able to deport them anywhere, being my point. We are, of course, responding to those horrendous killings in Australia yesterday. Bondi Beach, that setting that conjures up only smiles and sunshine ordinarily. But yesterday was the scene of murderous carnage as 15 people were killed. 10-year-old girl after a Holocaust survivor, people in their 80s. I mean, the randomness and the callousness of this was horrific. More than 50 shots ran out over a course of 10 minutes. Crowds, of course, fled the festival. This was Hanukkah festival that was taking place. And we now know, of course, there are still many others in serious conditions in hospital. Let's have a listen to what the Australian Prime Minister said yesterday.
An attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on every Australian. And every Australian tonight will be, like me, devastated on this attack on our way of life. There is no place for this hate, violence and terrorism in our nation. Let me be clear, we will eradicate it. Amidst this vile act of violence and hate will emerge a moment of national unity, where Australians across the board will embrace their fellow Australians of Jewish faith at this dark moment for our nation.
Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister. Let's get a word with Duncan Garden firstly, security analyst and international terrorism expert. Duncan, it's good to gauge your views on these things. We were asking the question at the beginning, how should the West respond to the Islamist terror threat? And of course, by definition, the Islamist terror threat isn't one sort of army that are in a specific location. We've seen it over here, we've seen it across Europe, and of course yesterday we saw it in Australia. Individuals that sign up to this, whatever ideology one wants to title it as, but these are individuals, which makes it very difficult, of course, for any authority, any government, any intelligence agencies to specifically track.
Yes, it does. There's an increased ability to track these people in one respect. They are using the internet more openly than they were previously. So a lot of the stuff that's picked up is people being quite open on the internet about their views, and those views becoming increasingly violent. And we I particularly see a lot of cases in which the security services have kept a really close eye on individual groups and individual postings and people that are encouraging violence. These aren't political people. These are people that are advocating jihad, and they're advocating it for a particular offensive cause, and sometimes they are targeting Jewish individuals. On the downside, as you rightly point out, is that these aren't large networks that we were used to a decade or more ago. These people aren't necessarily communicating or meeting up, and we can't see them getting together in each other's houses so that we can see that plot gradually building. What we're trying to do, or what the security services are trying to do, is piece together individual remarks that are made online and then try and infiltrate into those groups and become members of those groups quite often, in order to work out whether they are moving from just talking the talk into potentially walking the walk.
And what's interesting, and something we sadly have seen before, is one of the killers, the son, Naveed Akram, did come to the attention of the Australian authorities some 6 years ago. They did look into his case. They spent 6 months investigating it, and they concluded at the end that he was not deemed an imminent threat to the public. But there was clearly something there that suggested this person was of interest.
Yes, and obviously they were right, because it wasn't an imminent threat, because this is 6 years later that it's actually come to fruition. And it would be a mistake, I think, to imagine that Australia hasn't had a problem with extremism. It absolutely has. And a notorious propagandist, member of ISIS, a guy called Neil Prakash, was one of the individuals churning out an awful lot of their English language propaganda that went global to the English-speaking world. And they also, Sydney in particular, started to develop an extremism problem. We saw one or two individuals influenced over here, particularly a 15-year-old boy who was encouraging an individual in Melbourne to go out and execute soldiers at an Anzac parade in Australia. So we see that kind of global reach of ISIS, if you like. And although ISIS has always been arm's length from Hamas, they're not the same organizations at all. ISIS has sought to capitalize to a certain extent on the brutality of the Israeli response in Gaza to try and stir up emotions around potential recruits in the West.
What's your response, Duncan, to this idea that states such as ours and Australia countries such as ours recognising Palestine as a country and as a nation and all that goes with it? There's many people out there today, and yesterday these voices were very quick to say we've emboldened these extremists by doing that. Are those two points related?
Not really, no. I mean, I think we need to draw a line really between people who go out and protest in support of the Palestinian cause and what we're seeing here, which is jihadis really. And jihadis have a complicated history, which really these are individuals who are very often losers, if you like. They're very much aware they've become religious, but they're aware they're not going to paradise because their lifestyle just hasn't supported it, and they're seeking a shortcut to achieve those ends. They don't want to be normal Muslims. They don't want to go to the mosque and pray as anybody normally might do, or give to charity or look after the less fortunate. What they want to do is go out and kill people because they think that will get them a shortcut to paradise, particularly if they're killed in doing so. These are not people who are marching through the streets. They look down on people who are marching through the streets. And they believe in violence as the answer.
And to back to where we began on this point, Duncan, how do we respond then as the West, as a collective, if you like?
Well, it's complicated actually, Ian, because I know that the security services are quite worried about this increase in potential violence around the Gaza cause, if you like. They are worried that it's beginning to reach traction online, and these are things that we have to keep a close eye on, because the truth of the matter is we are an international society now, whether we like it or not, and the internet has done that to people. But I would point out actually, and if you're Jewish, one of the things that you might be feeling at the moment is that your society, your religion is under attack. But many of the cases that I've been doing over the last couple of years have actually been far-right young people trying to attack Jewish people or attack synagogues or firebomb synagogues. And actually, we've got to keep an eye out on all extremists, because they're coming from all sides, and we really do have to keep our eyes open and keep our eyes aware of what's on the internet, but also maybe what our friends and neighbours are saying to each other.
Indeed. Duncan, thank you for your time, sir. Really appreciate that. Duncan Gardam, security analyst and international terrorism expert. Let's speak to Keith Fraser, founder of the Israel Solidarity Movement. Keith, good afternoon to you. It was a horrendous day for Australia, a horrendous day for the Western world. But a horrendous day for Jewish people in particular, because this felt, well, it clearly was targeted at Jews. The timing of it, Hanukkah and all that goes with it, was not a coincidence. This was, getting right into people being out in public and celebrating their faith and everything that Hanukkah brings. But of course, it's not the first time we've seen this. And, we know there were sort of, on a smaller but nonetheless still fatal way. There were sort of echoes of October 7th in what happened here in Australia yesterday. Is there ever an answer to, why somebody would do this, and how, as we were saying to our last guest, how we respond to it? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you, Ian. I think there's two things to think of. The first thing that it immediately smacked me in the face of was that there was a father and son. You may recall on October the 7th when a Hamas terrorist slaughtered, I think, something like 10 innocents on that day, and phoned home in Gaza and spoke to his father and said, "I've just killed 10 Jews." And the father said, "Allah Akbar," and he was so proud of his son. You ask what we can do. We really need to get a grip of the problem within, unfortunately, large swathes of the Muslim community. Only 24% of British Muslims in a poll believed that Hamas committed murder and rape on the 7th of October. We also have seen in polls that a third of British Muslims want Sharia law adopted in this country. These are not people who are friends of the West, who appreciate our freedoms. And you mentioned, I think earlier to your earlier guest, about this notion about recognizing Palestine. Well, I say, if you recognize Palestine, you get Palestine. You have to understand the whole notion of the PLO, where the whole notion of Palestinian statehood was started by an Egyptian, not a Palestinian, who was born in Cairo, Yasser Arafat. The father of the Nazis, who slaughtered 6 million Jews and many other innocents, was not a German called Hitler. He was an Austrian called Hitler. This is the modern day Nazis, I'm afraid. And if we're going to get a grip on this, we have to smell the coffee. There is an issue amongst, I'm afraid to say, not all, but significant swathes of the Muslim community. Mehdi Hassan, the very far left, and I believe anti-Semitic Muslim commentator, said many years ago in a piece, he said that in Muslim homes, anti-Semitism is a guilty little secret. So I'm afraid that says it all.
He would dispute, of course, he's not here to defend himself, he would dispute that he himself is an anti-Semite.
Of course he would dispute that, but I would argue his focus and his sole focus on much of his programming is dedicated towards Israel and Jews, rather than the real atrocities going on around the world.
And I was just going to sort of almost tie in with, as you were saying, recognising Palestine and Australia. This country has gone ahead with this, and others around the world as well. Plus those marches where, and I mentioned this at the beginning, globalised the Intifada, thrown out liberally around these marches right across the planet almost, but particularly in this country as well. I mean, you haven't got to be Columbo to suggest that might just be part of the problem.
Without a doubt, yeah. I mean, look, like I've said earlier, if you recognise Palestine, that's what you get. Palestine and all the supporters you see out, they don't really care for the Palestinians, because if they did, they would care about all the Christians, the tens of thousands of Christians slaughtered in Nigeria, all the people slaughtered in Sudan, Yemen, all these other places around the world. Why are they focused on, inverted commas, Palestine? Because Palestine effectively means, and was set up by Yasser Arafat, an Egyptian, for the eradication of the Jewish state. When people call for Palestine to be a state, they mean the eradication of a Jewish one. I'm afraid to say it, and they will argue the contrary, but it is a fact. And the fact is, the proof is in the pudding. The jihadists, the globalize the Intifada mob, and the people who say from the river to the sea, the chap who and his son who carried out this atrocity on the weekend are exactly an example of that. And I would say this, what I mentioned with the father and son, and with the person like the Hamas attacker who phoned home, radicalization, extremism, it comes from the home. It doesn't come only from the internet. It starts from the home. Go on to memory.org, MEMRI.org, and you will see countless videos of sermons given in mosques where they are calling for violence. This has to be dealt with.
Yeah. On that point, Keith, some real points to ponder on. Thank you for your time, sir. What a grim discussion this has turned out to be on a Monday afternoon, but it's reflecting the reality of our times and the random nature of this and the brutality of this, the casual nature of a killing spree, broad daylight on a beach. I think that's almost part of the intent, to pick those innocuous moments. Keith Fraser is the founder of the Israel Solidarity Movement. Thank you to him. Over to you, 0344 499 1000.
And some of these tropes, these anti-Semitic tropes, which I think we'd all thought had gone away with the end of the Nazis in 1945, are suddenly there in large parts of our communities, and they need to be tackled head-on. And we need to have actually people standing up to them right across the board and saying that this is wrong and what's being put forwards, and this sort of bastardised ideology is wrong, and this hatred is wrong. And I think it's really important that we recognise that across the board.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's get some comment from you. Chris is in Surrey to start us off. Afternoon to you, Chris. What have you got for us?
Good afternoon, Ian. You very kindly read out my text earlier about rounding up the people on the watch list.
Yeah.
Which was the first point. But obviously, the hate marches have got to be banned, and this nonsense that they spout. I don't know where all this hatred comes from. And people say, we have to try and understand. What is there to understand?
It's also very selective, isn't it? I mean, if this is about, for some reason representing what you believe or they believe are, terrible events in another country, it's the inconsistency, because it only ever seems to be Israel that form the basis for their target. There's many other terrible things that go on, often involving Muslims as well, but they get largely ignored, always in favour of this kind of bullseye, which is anti-Israel.
Couldn't agree more, and I don't understand what Jews in Australia have got to do with what's happening in Israel and Gaza. Why is it that we don't see this sort of thing happening with Jewish people, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs?
What is that? Well, we will never know the answer to this, but one assumes the answer is yes. When you think, do these people, this father and son, they really think before they went out that morning they're about to go to paradise? Do they genuinely believe that in their hearts and their minds?
Well, that's the nub of the problem, Ian, because people who believe that, who are that brainwashed and brain dead that they believe that, can never be reasoned with. You can't have a debate with these people.
Well, indeed. And there's the problem, isn't it? Because you can't really fight an ideology in that respect. So you're forever coming back to the same point, which regrettably, when we ask the question, Chris, how should the West respond to this? Is there ever a response to this?
Well, no, you have to fight it. You have to tell them that, you have to show them that we hate what they're doing.
But they don't care about that, do they? They don't care.
Then we deport them, we get rid of them. We don't want people like that living in our
But you can't
society.
deport someone who's homegrown.
Why not? Why is a homegrown terrorist any different? It's worse in many ways because we've shown them...
No, but where do you deport somebody to if they're from this country?
If they're extremist Islamists, they want to live under Sharia law, let's send them to Saudi or Iran or...
Yeah, maybe there is... Yeah, I'm sure they'd be delighted to accept potential terrorists, but I know exactly where you're coming from. I don't know what the full answer could be, though. Chris, thank you for starting us off. Interesting call. What do you do with those people once you've identified them, as Chris did in an earlier message? You can say, well, there's 500 of these people. Send them where? Who's going to accept them? Dan is in Portsmouth on this point. Dan, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hello, mate. Well, I work in Saudi, and I tell you now, they wouldn't have them.
No.
They would just absolutely flat refuse. That's why they don't have any problems. The thing is, what we've got to stop doing is we've got to start realising that a long journey starts with one step, and the first step has to be, and unfortunately you guys are all part of this as well, you've got to realise that we're judging this religion on the way we judge other religions. Now, doing that is a bit like judging the boat people that are coming over the same way you judge someone from Sweden, all right? You can't do it. It's completely different. And if you want to prove that, go to a staunch Muslim family in a staunch Muslim area in England and ask one of them how they'd go about leaving the religion, all right? Ask them how that would go down. Then do the same to a Buddhist or a Christian, and you'll see the differences. And once you realise those differences, all right, maybe read the Quran or look at some of the scriptures and look at what's going down and see how it's no modernisation and there's no, you've got to help the ones that are not listening to those scriptures and the ones that aren't any longer.
Well, the issue, I suppose, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, Dan, but the issue is that, of course, those that practice Islam and would never in a million years want anything to do with somebody who carries out an attack like that. It's an existence, isn't it? It's not just about going to a mosque once a week. It's an existence, it's a culture, it's a lifestyle.
Absolutely, and as they would all tell you, even the better ones, it's their number one, it's what their priority is. And then the next thing I would do is then you have to start making them police themselves, the way you do with children, all right? And then the way you do that is when you find somebody, you foil an attack, or you find someone who's involved in an attack, unfortunately, you close their mosque down. All right, you make other people suffer. You shut their mosque down. You stop madrasas.
Well, but you know what? Some of these people don't even go to a mosque because they're not even allowed in a mosque because they're known to be a bit weird in that respect, prior to them carrying out some horrendous attack. Dan, thank you for that, mate. We've got to take some news, hence the reason why we step in at that point. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. How does the West respond to Islamist terror? What is the answer to that? Your thoughts and responses to what happened at Bondi Beach yesterday. Right now, the time is 2 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up on 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Yeah, good afternoon. Responding to events in tragic, murderous events in Australia yesterday. 2 gunmen, father and son, 15 dead, many more injured. Australia's worst terror attack. It was barbaric and callous in equal measure. We're asking the question, how does the West respond to what happened on Bondi Beach yesterday? Is there any kind of response to this? We'll have more details and more comment from you. Also this afternoon, hundreds of shoplifters could evade justice after a legal ruling that hampers private prosecutions. Up until now, a specialist London team for major retailers have been arresting and prosecuting offenders. They've been using like a private security outfit for this, securing banning orders and the like, but the model is now at risk, and it's been said that they can't continue in the same way. And a 5-day doctor strike in England will go ahead from 7 o'clock on Wednesday morning. BMA members voted to continue despite a new government offer. Ministers warn patients will be at risk amid intense hospital pressures from that wave of flu. Around about 83% of medics backed the walkout. This was an online poll over the weekend. We'll have more on that story as well. What does it mean for you? And do you stand with the doctors or very much against? 0344 499 1000. This in from Mike, who says, I think the problem with extremism and terrorism, terrorism and extreme Islam, is Western governments' fear in dealing with the problem being called racist or Islamophobic. It started off with hate preaching, with police guards, and has now moved on to regular barbaric attacks. Unless the police and the government crack down hard, it will never stop. Anyone that is a threat should be locked up until they die, because they will always hold that extremist mindset. And there is something to be said about that, but then you have to kind of balance that with the rule of law and, you know, the fact that somebody downloaded some literature or had a look at it. You know, how much do they have to have a look at before you deem them a threat? Is it one thing and you could do it? You know, you might be a student writing a dissertation, you could be a journalist doing some research, you could just be someone who's intrigued as to what's out there. How do you police all of that stuff? And that's the problem I think everyone's had. I do think that Mike's onto a really good point, though. The being deemed Islamophobic is absolutely key to this. One of the reasons why the government won't touch those marches, and some of the stuff that was being said and shown on banners in those kind of anti-Israel marches was absolutely horrific, and it got a free pass walking through the street, thousands of people on a weekly basis. You can have as many issues as you like with Israel, but this was going to a whole different level. You know, I know where I feel our ally is best placed. It's not with a medieval death cult called Hamas. It would be with a first world democracy called Israel, right? I mean, it doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that Israel has done. 0344 499 1000. Also, and there is a kind of a correlation in this story as well, the thousands of people marching for a sixth Sunday in a row in Crowborough. This is against plans to house 600 migrant men at local army barracks. About 100 are due to be relocated from a camp that's closing in Kent. Let's speak with Layla Cunningham, Reform Councillor with Westminster City Council, and also a former Crown prosecutor as well. Layla, good afternoon to you. I mean, this one's not going to go away, isn't it? It seems that the government have absolutely dug their heels in on these army camps with little or no regard as to who lives in the area and what those people think.
Yeah, and listen, people are called racist wrongly because people are protesting the process, not the people. You know, when decisions are taken, obviously, without consultation, without consent, communities are being treated like a dumping ground.
Yeah.
And any government that does this would provoke backlash. And I actually spoke to a lady from that town who protests every Sunday, and she was saying people move there to be off-grid. It's very quiet, everyone knows everyone, it's a very safe environment, and they feel, you know, it's an invasion of their space. And she was saying, she couldn't corroborate this, but she did say that she heard that the police attended the Saturday market and were giving out rape alarms. Don't know if that's true, but the fact that that is that kind of talk is. And you know, the worst part, Ian, is it's a very quiet town. And I'd understand if these men would be detained, that would go to some way to appease them. But these men are going to be moved in. 600 migrant men are going to be moved in and free to roam the town as they wish.
Average age about 25. And as I keep saying, look, neither you, I, or anyone else, nobody from Reform is saying that everyone is a terrorist, everyone is a rapist. We know that's not the case. However, we are being asked to play a kind of Russian roulette here because we don't know who those people are. What we do know is that many of them come from countries that have been our enemies. Many come from countries where organisations like the Taliban and things like that exist and exist in very prominent ways. Many of them come from countries where the idea of women's rights is very, very different to our women's rights. So the fact that a government would not take that on board when importing 600 25-year-old men from the very countries that the Foreign Office would advise you never to travel to as long as you live tells you everything, surely.
And, you know, it definitely does, because surely we're not saying every single man on that boat, or on those boats coming in, could be a rapist or a terrorist, but we don't have an effective filtering system to know who is and who isn't. And even if just a small number end up being sexual offenders, and we've seen quite horrific things happen, it's women and girls that pay the price. And Ian, I'll point to you that we have a government yesterday who announced this whole new process on safety of women and girls. But they're not talking about this. And the fact that the residents there have to hold up a sign that says it's not racist, just afraid, protect our women and girls, it's heartbreaking that they have to lay this out for our government.
You'd think, I mean, there are probably one or two stragglers at the back in the Labour Party that would understand this argument, but you'd think, you know, Keir Starmer's a lawyer. I know he's a human rights lawyer, and there are other legal brains on the front bench as well. It's not that hard to understand, is it? I mean, that's what I find confusing about this, Layla, is it's actually quite easy to get your head around the problem here.
It's pretty basic. Like you say, you know, we've got thousands of men. We have no idea of the history. We actually know that one of them was a convicted bomb maker in Egypt, part of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was his asylum claim was considered, and he was housed for 18 months in a hotel and then went on to rape a woman. You know, I'm not going to give these men the benefit of the doubt. For me, everyone is a criminal. Number one, it's a crime to enter our country illegally, and they're part of a massive smuggling gang. Let's just do that. And so I'm going to treat everyone like a criminal. Of course I am, because they've committed a crime in entering here. And that unknown, like you say, Ian, is such a massive risk. And the fact that our government completely ignores it and places them in these quiet towns and villages is a real dereliction of duty.
It's beyond extraordinary, isn't it? And the more you think about it, I mean, the evidence to support the arguments that would surely demonstrably show this is not about, you know, being anti any particular nationality or religion or gender or anything like that. It's very simple. If you get a visa to a country, to go to a country legally, then you've got to tick all sorts of security boxes. They will know if you've got a criminal record. They would know. And there's a reason they ask that, is because each country, our own and others, don't want people coming here that are from a very iffy past or have a very warped idea of what passes for acceptable, etc. So that's why we have the visa process. So the idea that you would have, in this case, and this is just one place, of course there's tens of thousands in this position with hotels as well as military barracks, the fact that you would have 600 people just pitching up in one small town, Crowborough, and having done none of those checks, would surely, by any measure, no matter who you are, any measure, Layla, would say, well, we have a problem here. We don't know who these people are.
No, but it's across the country, Ian. We don't know who these men are. They should not be allowed to roam our streets. They should be detained. And you hit the nail on the head, because our borders are a national security issue, my issue. It's stopped being immigration. And the government needs to recognise that. And that means British decisions, British law, and British enforcement. And, you know, if you need to read the Royal Navy to support our border protection, why are they not doing it? Many other countries do it without apology. I don't want any of, and you know, they released this big immigration policy, but Ian, that was about managing illegal migration.
Sure.
It was not about stopping it. And you know, Shabana Mahmood said it's quite a divisive matter. I don't think it's divisive at all. I think the country is united in that we want it stopped, not managed.
Yeah. It's interesting. I noticed the channel respite was over at the weekend as well. Lots of people over the last month from the left were chanting, there's no channel migration anymore. Well, that's probably because it piddled down every day for about a month. Once that stopped and a bit of sunshine shone through, 700 people decided to make that journey, all welcome with open arms, all given accommodation and 3 square meals a day.
And the audacity, I think some Labour MPs were like, our hard work has stopped people coming in. What hard work? There's, you come here, you get rewarded. There's no incentive to stop coming. And they say that, we're working upstream with France. France is a partner. When are they going to realise France is not a partner? They have no incentive to stop it. We have to rely on ourselves. Yeah. And somehow this government is pulling, Denmark, France, please, they obviously can't do it themselves. No other country has an incentive to stop it but us.
Yeah. And another story just to tag on to this, because we know that when people are selected to be deported, which seems frighteningly rare, curiously, all manner of other issues come up and the lawyers step in and they find all sorts of excuses, from chicken nuggets to goodness knows what else. But just recently, the defence of PTSD seems to be now more commonplace than ever before. There was one Egyptian rapist who raped a woman in Hyde Park who received a reduced 8.5-year sentence after a report on PTSD. Now, I think there's probably a few people listening to this show, former veterans and the like, who've got PTSD. The idea that it makes you go and rape somebody, I'm sorry, this is ridiculous.
It's not compassion, Ian. It's institutional failure. Rape victims are being told that the offender's past trauma matters more than their present harm. That's not justice. And I've been in those courts, by the way. I have been in a court where a publicly paid defender has stood up and said, Judge, my client has just arrived on a boat. Yep. We must understand how traumatic that is. And he's here illegally, and he has no other means to support himself but to commit crime. Sure. So then you'd think the judge would be like, get out of here. I don't care. He committed a crime.
Well, you'd think that would be the only answer.
I don't, yeah. Number one, I stood up and say, that's actually not mitigating, that's aggravating, because he's already committed a crime by being here. But the judge says, well, actually, let's order, like you read in these articles, a probation report and see, let's get to know him more. Meanwhile, Ian, victims, they live with lifelong trauma. There's no mitigation, no reduction, no sympathy from that. True. And it's frankly disgusting. And the fact that one of them, I think the Afghanis claimed, he didn't understand that consent doesn't come into play when you want to have sex with a woman. That should aggravate the sentence.
Well, right. We keep hearing this, don't you? I didn't realise you had different standards here. And curiously, just to sort of put the kibosh on that particular defence, many of these people come from countries where if you did carry out that act, you'd be hanging up by your whatsits by 6 o'clock, or somebody would just shoot you.
Of course, but Ian, you see, when you lose control of who enters the country, you lose control of the risk that they bring in. Yeah. And that's what happens. And, courts are pressured to manage risk through sentencing tweaks. There isn't enough prison space. We've let in so many people. We haven't built enough prisons. All these things come into play, and it's a massive institutional failure. And then, of course, they do bring in the human rights, and that's another reason to leave the ECHR. Yeah. But one thing that screams to me about these offenders who claim PTSD or whatever it is, I've had them claim ADHD as well, by the way, and that's taken into account. That's a mitigating factor to reduce their sentence. I want them deported. Yeah. I don't care if they're going back to the Taliban. These boys came and raped young girls.
Yeah, if you've raped...
They can go and do that in the Taliban, where it's normal.
If that doesn't get you deported, well, what the hell does get you deported? Yeah. I mean, that's almost as bad as it gets. And, here we are with this curious system. And I don't think it's all human rights, ECHR led. I think there is clearly domestic problems in this country where there is a sort of an aversion, almost. It's like the worst thing you can do to somebody. Sorry, if we've got a rapist or a killer or some other horrendous sex offender, they should not be here. And if they've come over on a boat, which some of these people have, then I don't think there's anything controversial. You'd think even a left-winger would get their head around that. But we live, as I always seem to say, Layla, in upside-down times. Listen, we hit the clock, but thank you as ever, Layla Cunningham, Reform Councillor with Westminster City Council, also former ex-Crown prosecutor as well. More response from you. Richard, down in North London, with what happened at the weekend in Bondi Beach. Richard, what are you thinking? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian, good to talk to you again. I mean, it's interesting to hear people's anger, but I think one of the things that we need to realise is that it's first of all to realise just how powerless we are. You've had a caller suggesting that we round people up. I mean, you know the figures on the prevent list at MI5 apparently, it's about 60,000. So, I mean, I'm not entirely sure we've got 60,000 operational troops in the British Army.
I don't think so.
And the reality is, even when you do to do the simple maths, if you're trying to monitor 60,000 people, presumably sort of 24 hours. I mean, okay, you're gonna have computer monitoring, etc., and phone tapping, but in theory, you need perhaps 2 people for every person that you're monitoring. I mean, we really just have to. So this is completely impractical. And secondly, I think another caller was saying, oh, well, this is really about this religion and we've got to get tough. I mean, the reality is, as I've said to you several times in recent weeks, the incitement laws we passed over the last few decades really mean you need to be very, very careful what you can say. Because it really isn't possible to actually single out one religion and say, well, actually, we have a problem here.
But we don't have a Prime Minister, do we, Richard? And we haven't had one for a long time who would stand up and get, it's always somebody reading from a clinically written press release that a SPAD has put together in the afternoon, and I'll read this out, Minister. It will sound, very measured, and we don't want measured. We really don't. We want anger, and we want absolute frustration. We want a Prime Minister to be losing their mind over this almost.
Yeah, and the one you've got is one. I mean, and this is one of the problems. I mean, really, my last point is we need to really make sure that Reform and the Conservatives, who are both saying that they want to leave the European Court of Human Rights and or Convention of Human Rights, and also replace the Human Rights Act, they've got to do it, because currently all the people that you're talking about, the reason why the law courts the reason why the law courts effectively stopped the Brexit powers so the reason why the law courts frustrated Rishi Sunak was because Keir Starmer was a sort of lawyer who was built into the lefty legal system, and ultimately human rights law means these people can stay.
Yeah, and
it's very, very tough.
Yeah, and if that is the law, then the law is clearly wrong in this respect. If you can't deport a rapist, for goodness sake, then God knows what you could do. Richard, thank you very much indeed for that. And you can just, I don't know whether Keir Starmer said it. I know he would have released a statement after Bondi Beach. He would have spoken to the Australian Prime Minister, all of that stuff. And you can sort of hear again, we stand with the people of Australia. You don't want to hear that. We stand with the people of Australia. Well, that's a given. For God's sake, that's a given. You would stand with victims of a barbaric death cult. Of course you would stand. You don't need to say that. What you do need to say is you need to get angry. You need to get angry about what is going on in this country. You need to get angry with the way too many people that actually are kind of okay with this. They sort of get it. They see it as retribution. They see it as kind of justice for Gazans and that part of the country, because they've correlated all manner of things. You can wear more than one hat, by the way. And if anyone at any level is somehow defending or even beginning to understand the barbarity of 2 people just taking pot shots, because it was literally that in the sunshine on Bondi Beach, and the setting and everything just compounds the precarious nature of our times when you are living among people who don't care if they die, who genuinely believe God told them to do it, and are absolutely convinced they're going to go off with a bunch of virgins in paradise as a result of their misdemeanors. I mean, this would, in any other world, this is the definition of flipping madness, for goodness sake. But it's not funny, as it might be in a kind of Monty Python sketch. It is beyond evil. It is horrific, of proportions we could never do justice to in terms of trying to describe it. So I want a Prime Minister that's going to reflect that, reflect all of that, Starmer. Give it absolute, everything you've got. But we won't hear that. I stand with Australian people. That's what we'll hear. Ain't good enough, mate. 0344 499 1000.
And some of these tropes, these anti-Semitic tropes, which I think we'd all thought had gone away with the end of the Nazis in 1945, are suddenly there in large parts of our communities, and they need to be tackled head-on. And we need to have actually people standing up to them right across the board and saying that this is wrong and what's being put forwards, and this sort of bastardised ideology is wrong, and this hatred is wrong. And I think it's really important that we recognise that across the board.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Cliff in Berkshire says, Ian, I cannot stop wondering how a father and son would start planning such a thing, to kill and maim a group of people different to them. I wonder which of them first mooted the idea. I could not imagine, when he was still alive, my father asking me if I fancied nipping out and murdering a group of people different to themselves. It makes no sense. I said, yeah, it really, when you put it like that, and the other thing that makes no sense, and a few people have picked up on this, is how did one man have 6 licensed guns? You know, I know if you lived in the Northern Territory and you ran a 2,000-acre farm, you might kind of understand the need for that for a whole variety of reasons. But how do you live in a city and get a licence for 6 guns? Particularly, by the way, this is a person that was licensed whose son, 6 years ago, was getting checked out by the authorities. The ASIO, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, looked into it. Is there no joined-up thinking on that particular point? But Cliff is right. At some point in the planning, wouldn't somebody go, Dad, is this right? But such is the rabbit hole you've gone down with your insane, murderous, fake religious endeavours. Let's go to Mark down in London. What have you got for us, Mark? Hi.
Hi, Ian.
Hiya.
Been thinking about this a lot. I'm a Jewish guy in North London. People have often said, and I've heard it said many, many times, and I've said it myself, it starts with the Jews, but it never ends with the Jews. But actually, I've been thinking about it today. It hasn't even started with the Jews. There's been so many things that have gone on in the last 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it may be, since 9/11. Right now it's the Jews these guys are after. But previous to that, it's all of us. I mean, it's really all of us. And until the world, and that includes not just the politicians, but people living in countries like this and in Australia and America and France and all the rest of it, wake up to the fact that we're in a civilizational struggle with these people.
Yeah.
What happens is there's a terrorist atrocity. It could be 9/11, it could be Manchester Arena, it could be 7/7, the Bataclan, Nice. We're shocked. And then we all dies down for a bit, and then we're shocked again when the next thing happens. We shouldn't be shocked. Yeah. This is the game that the long game that these scum, frankly, are involved in. And right now it's the Jews because of Gaza and all the rest of it. Tomorrow it'll be somebody else, and people have got to wake up to this and stop. What's the word I'm looking for? Stop sort of pandering to, I don't want to be seen as Islamophobic and all this nonsense. Frankly, it's not good enough, and it's not good enough from any of our politicians. Obviously so. Obviously Starmer is one of the weakest prime ministers we've ever had. Obviously Albanese is a complete fool. The only one who seemingly has any kind of handle on this is Donald Trump. But even he says a lot, and but it goes beyond our politicians. It's up to the rest of the populations at large, the decent majority, to understand what we're up against here and stop virtue signalling, and to understand what we're up against. Because frankly, these people play a long game. They are, they're all. They may. Some people talk about lone wolves. There's no such thing as a lone wolf. They don't operate in a total vacuum. They may not have been directly, in this particular case in Bondi, they may not have all been, these two characters may not have been recruited by Iran, but they're influenced in some way, whether it's the marches they see in, what they've seen in Australia or whatever. And there'll be others sitting in this country thinking the same. And the people in power hold a huge responsibility, but I think it goes well beyond people in power. I'll go to a vigil tonight. I'm a Jewish guy in North London, like I say. There's a vigil tonight at the Houses, or not a vigil, but a gathering, shall we say, at the Houses of Parliament. I can guarantee you, Ian, there might be a couple of thousand people there. It's not been well publicised because only Jews know about it for obvious reasons, because of the threat that is there. It will be 99% Jewish people there tonight who will be saying, and we'll all be, comforting each other, all the rest of it. There'll be hardly anyone from the non-Jewish faith. Now, some of that is down to security because, these things can't be publicised that well in advance, to be fair, from a practical point of view. Yeah. But until the rest of the population, we're a tiny, tiny, tiny part of this population. We're a tiny part of the world's population. But the rest of the world has got to understand that we're all in this together, quite frankly. And that doesn't just mean Israel. That means everybody, Jewish, non-Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, doesn't matter what you are, Chinese, Japanese, we're all in this together against a murderous cult. And if you don't do anything about it, if you don't unite against it, then quite frankly, there's no hope.
There is no hope, and unfortunately, and I heard Julia talking about this, and something that I banged on about for a long time. This kind of not defence, but explanation that and of course we don't tar all people from a religion with the same brush. Anyone with a brain knows that, and it's a minority. But everything the Nazis were a minority, Mark, as I'm sure you know. Everything was a minority to start with. It's a minority that is rather big and frankly lethal, and not one that you can write off because it's a minority.
No, and a minority that manages to inculcate useful idiots, as we often call them, usually from the left, almost certainly from the left, into their mindset. And it's a toxic brew that has been allowed to happen across the Western world. And we see it. We talk about it every day.
Well, indeed,
we see it every day.
Yep.
And it seems that it just is allowed to fester and fester and fester. And it's got to where we are today. And it will happen again, like I said before, sorry to bang on about it, but it will happen again in a few months' time, somewhere else. It might be at the start of Passover next time, or whatever it may be, and we'll be shocked again. But the Jewish community aren't shocked, as you've often heard. We're not surprised. We knew it was happening. They knew it was going to happen in Australia. But the rest there'll be all these passwords from idiots like Starmer, who frankly is totally useless. There'll be all the usual pious words and vigils and candles. Give me a break. It's time to actually start doing something. It
is. But we have weakness throughout the system, and there's, I think, a big factor in this problem. Mark, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. And the point about the minority. Who is it we're looking for? We're obviously looking for people who, clearly actively appear to be dabbling with terrorist intent. There is that. But there are way too many, our previous guest alluded to a website where you can see preachers from around the Western world who are happy to put their name to, horrendous attacks. But even if it's not about specifically that, I'm thinking about the Batley school teacher, where groups of parents sort of hounded him out of a school, absolutely furious that this man had shown some cartoons of some prophet or something, and got very, very upset about it. And, some people saying this guy should be in jail, should be banned from teaching, should never, ever again. It's like, whoa, hang on a second. When we talk about cultural assimilation, if ever there was an example where it's not active, it is there. The kids in Wakefield that were suspended from school because a Quran was partially damaged. And then, do you remember, I've talked about this often enough, there was a press conference that was convened afterwards that had the local imam, the chief of police, a local councillor, the mother was there, and somebody else was on this panel. It looked like some bizarre Sharia court where the imam saying, we're not going to let this go. What should have happened at that point is the police officer on the panel should have stood up and said, sorry, mate, you are going to let this go. You're really going to let this go. It was a kid that damaged a book. We don't give a hoot. And whatever book it happened to be, we still wouldn't give a hoot. So stop it. Those kind of people are a problem. I think they are a problem. And that, by the way, that particular imam, when you started to look him up, you saw, well, he's got other views, I mean, you wouldn't want to be a gay next-door neighbour, put it that way. 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is talk. This one from Mark in Somerset. Mark, the farmer in Somerset, says, afternoon to you, Ian. I just wanted to message you about what you said about how a terrorist had so many guns. I've got 12 licensed firearms and shotguns. The checks I have to go through is insane. But I'm not mad about that, as I'd rather we had the checks, unlike America. Mark is a farmer in Somerset. I totally understand the deal there. Why somebody who's not a farmer in Bondi Beach or that neck of the woods has 6 licensed guns. I think, well, right now, that's a big debate, of course, in Australia. It's not the answer necessarily to what happened. If somebody is intent on that level of murderous carnage, then whatever rules and regs are in place on firearms, I'm pretty sure they would still find a way around it. I want to bring in this story as well. Britain's military chiefs have urged a nationwide step up to deter Russia, calling on the public to prioritise defence and resilience, warning that Putin's aggression in Ukraine threatens all of NATO, including the UK, and aims to challenge, divide and ultimately destroy the alliance. Let's get a word from Tobias Ellwood, former Defence and Foreign Minister in the Conservative government. Tobias, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. This is Richard Knighton's words, of course. He might be right. I'm sure he is right. But how do we implement what he's saying?
Well, good afternoon. Yes, and it's not just the head of the armed forces saying this, but on the same day, we've also got the head of MI6, Blaise Metzorelli, who's also giving a speech saying that Russia is openly hostile to Britain, that we're now entering a shadow war. Certainly from my perspective, we are simply not ready. Our conventional forces have been withered down over the last couple of decades. Industrially, we couldn't replace, let's say, the 147 battle tanks were we to go to war. And now our infrastructure, our way of life, our society is being attacked on a regular basis. I'm sure we've discussed many times on your program the cyber attacks that are taking place, the challenges to our undersea cables. This is the here and now. This is before Russia is able to claim any sort of victory, let's say, in Ukraine. So where does this go? This is why we need to wake up and recognize we've entered a new era of insecurity, and every one of us must ask ourselves, what can we do to make our country safe? How can we participate as a society to strengthen our resilience?
Well, on that point, I was going to ask, these are very wise words, and we would all echo that, of course, but how do we step up, whether it's government or individuals? What are we supposed to do?
Well, our communities must become more resilient. Let's give an example. Let's say there was a 72-hour blackout, no electricity, no internet, no water. Who would you turn to for support? It couldn't be the standing army, because that's simply too small. So we need to develop the resilience capabilities within our communities. We need to be able to protect our infrastructure that's increasingly being attacked by drones and other forms of sabotage. That's separate to our standing armed forces. That's separate to our cyber resilience and so on. That's an all-of-society approach in knowing what each of us would do to protect ourselves, our family, to be ready for what's actually coming over the hill. We're not even having that debate yet. And that leads us into the bigger question of whether now we should return to some form of national service, not like we had in the past, but a modern national service, similar to what we see indeed in Finland, where they have an excellent model where everybody knows what they need to do in case of attack. But the fact that they have it there offers a resilience, a deterrence to prevent Russia from actually wandering into their country in the first place.
You talked about individual sort of resilience and stepping up and all the rest of it, Tobias. Back in the day, of course, I'm sure you remember this, during the height of the Cold War, people were almost encouraged to dig a bunker in their back garden. In fact, I think even Blue Peter might have done a whole show on it. You know, when they weren't raising money for guide dogs, they were telling you how to protect yourself from an impending nuclear war. Are we talking about that?
We are talking about, to some extent, the fact that a tactical low-yield nuclear weapon could very well be used in anger in the next 5 years is concerning. But the war that we're about to, or that we've already entered to some degree, is a grey zone hybrid war. It's an attack on our society from afar. It's the attacks such as we saw at Heathrow or at Land Rover or indeed Marks and Spencer's. It's ways of causing our economy to be affected and then sow political discord as well. That's what we're not good against. That's what we're not able to stand up to. The fight, though, to me, very, very clear, is currently in Ukraine. Because if Russia can claim any sort of victory there, it will advance its interests further across Eastern Europe. It's already doing so on a regular basis. We haven't woken up to that. Trump hasn't woken up to that. And if he had, he would be more inclined to support Europe rather than back Russia.
And on that point, Tobias, thank you very much as ever for your time, sir. Tobias Elwood, former Defence and Foreign Minister, with us on the programme. I don't know on an individual level what you would do. If he talked there about the kind of cyber nature of the Russian threat, which is very real, and of course, they nautical vessels, mooching around on the seabed looking for cables that they could saw through if they had to, etc. And that's always, I think, the smart money. Everybody knows that the new face of warfare really doesn't have to be sort of the literal battlefield or planes dropping bombs. If you were to wipe the NHS database or cut off internet capability for a large chunk of the country, including the government, you're home and dry. You haven't got to drop a single bomb or fire a single bullet, have you? But I don't know on an individual basis how I could protect myself from that. If I go to my internet service provider, I don't think they're going to provide me with... am I meant to set up my own kind of, sort of satellite, almost Dad's Army style dish on the roof of the garden shed moment as a way of contacting my fellow humans in the event of an impending Russian cyber invasion? How do you do that? And the dig in the hole in the backyard, I remember as a kid, genuinely, this was the tail end of it all. So my generation didn't get the full thrust of it, but it was there, wasn't it? The two tribes era, Reagan and Gorbachev and Thatcher and all of that, coming to an end, Glasnost and the whole thing, the wall coming tumbling down. But just prior to that, talk about people building nuclear bunkers was scary. It was quite terrifying, really, to think of, well, that could happen. Big old mushroom cloud over Canterbury or something, which would wipe everything out within its, massive range, etc. And this was being openly talked about on TV shows. How do you build a bunker if you need to build a bunker? Well, here's Percy Thrower to tell us how. Stick some chrysanthemums on the top. It'll look rather nice if you're not using it. Tracy is in Hereford. Reference the Bondi shootings yesterday. Tracy, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
I am more frustrated with everyone's sort of answer to Keir Starmer not having a handle on this, whereas, it keeps coming out, people think he's incompetent, doesn't know what he's doing, or that he's just tone deaf to the situation. Ian, I honestly do think he's well aware of what it is, but it's disgraceful, really, that a Prime Minister's job is to look after his nation and the people in it. And he just doesn't seem to be doing this. He has no interest, the Jewish community or anybody. And, I think it's sad. I heard on Julia's show this morning that, not Julia's, Jeremy's, that there's some Jewish people that were thinking of leaving this country and trying to work out where to go just to be safe. But, yeah, the Bondi Beach shootings yesterday, the first thing, obviously my heart goes out to the people there, but it was more the case of when's it going to happen to us, not if, when. And that's the scary thing.
That went through. Obviously we've been there before. We 7/7. London Bridge, Westminster Bridge. We have sadly been there before, and we're not hardened to it. And of course, prior to that, people in our country living with the constant threat of IRA attacks and the like. So, in terms of bombings and attacks, we are sort of, there's no boast in this. We're sort of kind of used to it. It doesn't make it any less shocking when it happens. But I thought exactly as you just said, Tracy, that yesterday I thought, it's almost you feel a clock ticking where this is going to happen again.
Yeah, I'm at the point where I am scared, thinking there's something big about to happen and it's just round the corner. I mean, my husband's going to London this week. He got a nice watch as a Christmas present. I said, please don't wear your watch. Do you really need to go this close to Christmas? And we're both ex-forces, but he's been Afghan, I've been Iraq. We know what these guys are like. And I'm sorry, I'm sick of the left putting a label on me to shut me up. They do that to shut intelligent people up for fear of offending the sick, in my book.
Yeah.
I'm done with all the labels. I'm stating fact, the obvious, the statistics, the evidence. These people are no good. If they were all right, why aren't all the other Muslim countries taking them? They don't, because they know what they're like.
Well, yeah, indeed. And many of those Muslim countries do have incredibly strict and not necessarily our flavour of running a country, but they don't tolerate this kind of stuff. And, indeed, and if you were to, suddenly set up your bomb-making factory in Saudi Arabia, you'd probably be shot at dawn the minute you were discovered. There'd be no hanging around, and certainly no human rights lawyers coming onto the case to give your defence over, I don't know, having PTSD over something or whatever. Listen, Tracy, I've got to move, but thank you for that enlightening call from Tracy, and a sort of vague warning in there as well from Tracy in Hereford, and we do have to be vigilant about this kind of stuff. Angela says, it was the children in Manchester and Southport who could have been Muslim, for all the perpetrators knew. Yesterday it was a Jewish festival, and banning guns won't make any difference. Maybe a clue was there already and not joined up. Thank goodness for the fearless hero who took one of them down. I mean, that was an incredible piece of footage. It sort of really did illuminate the changing world we live in, and people having, constantly hooked up to live commentary and feeds and filming and all that goes with it. And it's not always pretty, and there was some horrible stuff doing the rounds yesterday, as we see with all of these kind of attacks. But the guy that steps in and sort of jumped on the back of this guy, that was an incredible moment, and who knows what, how much worse it might have been had this man continued at that point. He did then continue, of course, after he managed to run away, but it was just incredible to see that. The point is, I think, to go back to what Tracy was saying and what Angela is saying here, if you are of that mindset, then you're not really bothered whether the people might be Muslim or anything, because you don't really see yourself as the Muslims you would look at would be fake Muslims as far as your extremism is concerned. You wouldn't find yourself pitching up in a mosque very often and getting much of a welcome, because you wouldn't identify with, these people they don't know what they're doing. They've got to fight, and they've got to fight to the death. If that means dying, that's the only version that their politicised Islamism takes them in. So they wouldn't care. They absolutely wouldn't care. 0344 499 1000.
and some of these tropes, these anti-Semitic tropes, which I think we'd all thought had gone away with the end of the Nazis in 1945, are suddenly there in large parts of our communities, and they need to be tackled head-on, and we need to have actually people standing up to them right across the board and saying that this is wrong and what's being put forwards, and this sort of bastardised ideology is wrong, and this hatred is wrong, and I think it's really important that we recognise that across the board.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk at Christmas. On a lighter note as well, just gone 10 to 3, by the way. We've got a brand new Voice of Doom. If you're listening to this for the very first time ever, firstly, hello and welcome to the boudoir of common sense. There's all of that. That's a given. Secondly, you think, what is the Voice of Doom? It's just it's a posh way of saying it's a mystery voice, but it's always political. You know, what with us doing current affairs and phone-ins and stuff based on the events of the day. So it's political. You're looking for a politician, past, present, left, right, dead or alive. One straightforward question. Who is this?
Going to be community relations.
So it's day one, brand new voice. Who is this?
Going to be community relations.
And because it's the first day, we can give you another spin.
Going to be community relations.
Spin. 87222. Don't phone, just message. 87222. If somebody gets it right, we reveal it after the news. If nobody gets it right, then we roll it over to tomorrow. 87222. If you know who this is.
Going to be community relations.
And we'll leave it at that. Steve in Bromsgrove says, I have a cellar, 2 weeks of bottled water, a month of dried food, 750 litres of rainwater collected, 4.8 kilowatt petrol generator, spare petrol for keeping the fridge going, have rechargeable lights, solar charge battery supply. Trouble is, if I start the Jenny, I will attract people from miles around, says Steve. He's well sorted there. And he probably walks around in camouflage all day, just waiting for the potential of a Russian invasion. You can't be too careful. Let's go to Georgina down in London. Georgina, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Well, the whole of the Western world is under attack from radical Islam. And unless the government's going to eradicate this cancer, and that's what it is, from our civilised society, we're going to remain living with this very real and present danger. We must close our borders immediately, Ian. Anyone who is known as a threat to our population or our security must be detained and deported. And media platforms where this Islamist spew is aired must be shut down. We can have no more of this rhetorical medieval ideology permeating our population. We've allowed the enemy within to infiltrate our country, as well as other countries have done all over the world. Unchecked and unvetted migrants being allowed to flood our shores, and we're now paying a high price for the negligence of our governmental bodies, for the sake of virtue signalling, box ticking, for the sake of multiculturalism and cultural diversity, and whatever apologies the government may begrudgingly give, or any promises of protection they may make, is now far too little, far too late. It is them that have welcomed this danger into our midst with open arms, but it is us who are paying the price for their cultural ignorance. We've been aware of the danger of radical Islam that's been allowed to fester within our country, but when we've dared voice our views, we've been vilified and called racist, bigot, far-right or Nazi. But these words now have no meaning. None of the imams from the Islamist community are going to come forward to condemn the horrific massacre in Australia, the same as there was no condemnation from them when the attack happened at the synagogue in Manchester not long ago. They don't come forward, Ian, because they condone what's happening, and we can't let this carry on, because we are going to see a lot more of this in the coming future.
Do you think, and it's such an interesting question, that business about I mean, I don't imagine many people condone it, but I hear what you're saying. By omission, by the silence, there is that sense that, well, you know, would there not be a bigger voice? I also understand that, you know, if there is a, you know, an attack that's done in a different... It's for individuals to take responsibility. It shouldn't always be a wider community. But I do think there needs to be more in that respect, because whilst the average Muslim would be as condemning, and I'm sure there are prayers being said in mosques after what happened in Australia, but there's almost a code of protection that exists incrementally, I think, Georgina. The average person wouldn't want to say, I support this. But then there's somebody else says, no, I don't support it, but, you know that one, but. And then the others say, I don't support it, but, and well, I understand a little bit of it. And it's that kind of pecking order that creates the problem. When you get to the very end, you get your terrorist.
Well, we need for the leaders of the mosques to come forward, and we need them to condemn what's happened. We need to see that. Also, I don't know whether a lot of people have read the Quran, but I have, because I believe that you can't have a viable argument if you don't know all the facts. Now, I have read the Quran more than once to get to grips with the ideology of this. Well, I can't call it a religion, I call it a cult. And the thing is, there is a lot of hatred for other cultures, and we need now to be very wary about what's being said in our schools and on social media, because this is causing problems for the whole of the Western world.
Well, there is no doubt that it is causing problems. Listen, Georgina, I step in for no other reason than we're about to hit the news. We will talk to, thank you as ever, Georgina, and we will talk to Cindy in a few moments too. I just didn't want to go to Cindy now and only have 30 seconds. Lots to be said on what Georgina just raised. I think the Muslim elders, the Muslim Council of Elders on Sunday issued a strong condemnation of the mass shooting in Bondi. In that statement, under the leadership of Dr. Ahmed Al-Tayyib, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, the council said the shooting, which left multiple people dead, violated core religious and moral principles shared across faith. The council said the attacks on civilians runs counter to Islam's teachings, as well as universal ethical and human values, and erodes the foundations of coexistence and social stability. And I know there is a lot of selective. This happens in all faiths. I get it, all right. People can select different things. I've seen in the Quran is, Quranic teachings. If you do a decade of trying to learn about the Quran or the Bible or the Torah, whatever, you still wouldn't know half of it. And context is key. I know that much. Not to defend bad phrases or chapters or verses in any book, for that matter. But I know it's darn easy to take something out of context. 0344 499 1000. Lots to come in the next section. And will we get a winner to the Voice of Doom? Find out after the news at 3.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon, welcome back. It is the home of common sense. So much to get into here, of course, and we are naturally responding to the horrendous, murderous scenes out of Sydney yesterday on Bondi Beach. A massacre, 15 dead. One young girl as young as 5, people in their 80s, a former Holocaust survivor, 2 rabbis. I mean, goodness me, the horrendous, random nature of this needs no more explanation to be as repulsed and disgusted and disturbed by all of this. The question that does remain, however, and continues to remain when we see these kind of attacks, is how does the West respond to Islamist terror? What is the answer to that? Also this afternoon, hundreds of shoplifters could evade justice after a legal ruling that hampers private prosecutions. After lots of retailers were fed up with not getting anything done, they clubbed together and essentially hired in their own private bobbies, securing banning orders and all sorts of things. That could be about to come to an end. What do you make of that? And that doctor strike, is it going ahead? Is it not going ahead? Yep, as from a couple of hours ago, they announced it is going ahead this week on Wednesday, 7 a.m, after the BMA members voted to continue. This is despite government warnings that it will cause a huge pressure from the current wave of flu. It was 83% of clinicians that backed the walkout. It was an online poll at the weekend. Not sure that online, does it make a difference to how you vote on these things? Clicking on a website like you're booking a holiday? Has that got the same thing as turning up at a big meeting and writing down on a card, yes or no? Nonetheless, it's going ahead. It's 5 days. It will cause carnage. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This in from Lee, who says the elephant in the room is the Middle East. Surely it's obvious why they don't tolerate radical Islam, while the West burns under this radical Islam. Investment and tourism is increased in the East as they advertise their wonderful countries, like Dubai, for example. I realise this is only part of it, but it makes sense why they're not active in helping us. It's kind of interesting is that because they don't have the same problems in those countries, which is curious. I mean, if you take Saudi Arabia, you know, if you like the spiritual home of Islam, Mecca and all that goes with it, then you'd think this would be the very place that, you know, you'd have the king or at least a very senior member of the royal family standing up. We absolutely condemn what happened in Sydney. They almost just keep out of the whole thing. And it doesn't go on over there. And I wonder, is that just because of the very strict code of conduct everybody lives by over there, that it wouldn't be tolerated if you were found? You know, I don't know the answer, but it is nonetheless rather interesting. We do stick with this story as well, and we continue to take more calls from you too. Of course, the fallout from this, if you like, the legacy, is that here we are at a very specific time in the Jewish calendar where security is now being upped. It's all very well to say it won't change our way of lives, and sadly it sort of does in many respects. Synagogues already reeling after what happened in Manchester have upped security in many parts of the country, and I would imagine that's intensified further as a result of this. Anyone who's getting together in order to mark Hanukkah will also be considering, you know, their security arrangements as a result. So it does horrendously change something. And you have, of course, more than one thing bubbling away here. You have clearly murder of innocent people, but of course this was a very specifically targeted attack, and the gunmen were looking to kill Jews. There's no doubt about that. Anti-Semitism in this country is horrifically increasing. And you know what? There are people who say, I don't agree with what happened. Of course I don't. It's awful. I pray for the victims. But some will understand it. I don't understand it. I can't pretend to I couldn't get to first base in understanding this. But let's not forget the anti-Semitic component to this, the driving force of this Jew hatred that is weaving its way around the world, often unchecked, sometimes given a big fat green light by governments. If you look at the anti-Israel protests, because that is what they have been taking place, I think there is a good starting point for that. So our governments are often to blame in these things as well. Alex Hearn is the director of Labour Against Anti-Semitism. Alex, good afternoon to you. It is, look, it's not an entirely new debate, of course, you know, whether we're talking about, you know, any form of discrimination, but there is certainly huge concerns at the moment in the Jewish community that not only is anti-Semitism on the rise, it's being given a sort of tacit go sign from the government.
Yeah, the Australian Jewish Association posted a message saying, how many times did we warn the government? We never felt once that they listened. And sadly, British Jews know exactly what they're talking about, as do many other Jewish communities around the West. Because on a weekly basis, we hear calls to globalise the Intifada, an Islamist call for violent uprising. And we hear chants like resistance is justified and by any means necessary, slogans that have become absolutely routine at anti-Israel rallies across the world, whether it's on the streets, in campuses, or even at gigs in concerts. Well, Bondi Beach is exactly what globalised the Intifada looks like.
Correct.
Dead Jews.
Yeah. There is. Can I just add to that, Alex? And I don't know, you know, this for a fact, but it's, you know, there were echoes of October 7th, of course, in the sense that obviously it wasn't as, you know, in terms of casualties and those killed, but in terms of almost the innocence of the setting, you know, appeared to be sort of feed the appetite of the terrorist, if you like. I mean, I don't know whether that is thought out beforehand, but it certainly feels like that. This was a family day out in the sunshine on the beach.
Oh,
October 7th was a music festival, you know.
And don't forget, Heaton Park in Manchester attacked Yom Kippur, which is a very solemn religious day. This is Hanukkah, a celebration. It's no coincidence that they target Jewish life. Protesters in America and the UK protest synagogues as well. So since October the 7th, Jews have been killed on 5 different continents, and the extremism that drives this, what we're talking about, is actually a global problem that threatens the functioning of our societies, because we begin to look like failed states if this type of thing becomes the norm. So to give you one example, last Saturday in Birmingham, marchers, led by a huge banner at the front of their march, demanded the one solution of Intifada revolution. Could they be any clearer? These were the words shouted by the man after he shot dead 2 people outside a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C. in May. And now we're seeing their wish come true. Their one solution for Jews is taking Jewish lives as it's rolled out across the Western world.
So this went unchecked in a public protest?
Yes, last Saturday in Birmingham, a whopping great banner with the upside down red triangle used by Hamas to talk about targeting Israelis and Jewish civilians in their propaganda.
How do you not have 25 cops jump on top of you if you're carrying something like that? I mean, the fact you throw the word solution in any context is clearly, you know, the game is up at that point, isn't it? You know, and to frame it in this way and do so publicly is clearly a call to arms, isn't it?
Look, I watched as police protected racist protesters at a synagogue in St John's Wood, and they did this this zone to protect the synagogue, and the synagogue was on the very edge of it, and they didn't even enforce it properly. And the racism and hate coming out from those people was horrible. And it's become so normalised, but we should never, never accept it as normal. It might be metaphors for some people, but the fact is that it's Islamist doctrine, and it's been infused with Soviet and Nazi ideology. And it only takes a few literalists. That's what we saw at Bondi, is that it only takes a few people to actually cause complete havoc and death and destruction. So when you think about how this hatred has become cultivated, well, you know, BBC journalist Nick Robinson said, if you can't imagine empathy for Jews being killed, then imagine it happening to another minority. And Labour donor Dale Vince blamed Israel and then asked people to think about the Holocaust against turkeys over Christmas, because apparently Jews are now something less than poultry. And I think it's also worth pointing out that this is a global hate movement. You know, the highest daily total for racist incidents against Jews in 2025 was 26 incidents, and that was the day after Bobby Villan's anti-Semitic rant at Glastonbury that was broadcast on the BBC, who they admitted it was anti-Semitic. And then in Australia, masked extremists ransacked an Israeli restaurant called Miznon and attacked customers while chanting that slogan, death, death to the IDF.
Yeah.
We saw another branch of that restaurant, by the way, attacked in Notting Hill just the other day, and police failing to maintain order.
Do we need our political leaders to be more animated about this? And I'm always reminded, look, you know, Donald Trump is not everybody's cup of tea, but I think the one area that he seems to sort of shine on, and, you know, you hope it's authentic, is when something happens, and there was the incident a few weeks ago where a couple of service personnel were shot dead in the street. There is a kind of, and I know some people say it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction, but that sort of real visceral sense, the furnace of anger in his belly, that he's with the people and he's not going to take this anymore. Whereas we tend to get politicians who've got one of their spads to write a press release for them, and they stand there at the dispatch box and very clinically and very neat and tidy clipped words read out, you know, we stand with you and things like that, which doesn't mean very much. You sometimes want to hear a political leader who's absolutely fuming about this.
We don't need thoughts and prayers from our government, particularly from our police leaders. We don't need them. We don't care about them. They don't keep us alive. We need action. Funnily enough, I had this conversation with a policeman outside the St. John's Wood Synagogue protest, and I was asking why these people weren't being moved on. And he was citing all these rules, and I said to him, you know that if there was the political will to do this, it would just happen. It would be made to happen. And he couldn't say a damn thing against that. And you just have to look at the West Midlands police, who banned Israel Maccabi fans, apparently bowing to pressure from this vocal minority, and then misled Parliament about it. Allegedly acting also on a report from a former Hezbollah fighter.
Yeah, I mean, you really can't make that up. I mean, it's just, if it was, it would be satire if it wasn't so darn serious.
Exactly. So this is the reality at the moment. In the UK, there are 8 racist attacks against Jews daily. And there's hardly any Jews in Britain, right? And they tell us it's about Israel, but they target us behind, at our synagogues. We worship behind high fences with security guards. Jewish children are told to hide their identity on the way to school. My friend's daughter goes to a Jewish school surrounded by police and did terror drills from the age of 4. This is the reality of life for British Jews, and it's a stain on our country.
It really is. Alex, this is powerful stuff. We will speak again. Thank you for your time. Alex Hearn, who's Director of Labour Against Anti-Semitism, just running through just a handful of the sort of head-scratching issues around. In fact, they're more than head-scratching and face-palming and head hits desk moments. They're beyond that. Beyond the pale. This you do sort of think, well, hang on, who's running the show here? Where's my Prime Minister? Where's my Home Secretary? Where's the real outrage from those people? Not a press release, please. Not a candle and not a kumbaya. Action. Adrian is in southern France. Adrian, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, southwest France.
Southwest, do apologise. Big difference, of course. Totally different class of person, of course.
I can't afford to live in southern France. First of all, thanks for listening to me. You and your colleagues doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
All of you. I won't name them all because they get big-headed. This question of the UK government, I left England 20 years ago for different reasons, except I couldn't stand having what's his name, Mayor Livingston, one of the architects of anti-Semitism today, followed up by Mr. Jeremy Corbyn. But I
They would, of course, I have to just say, for legal reasons, they would argue against both of those terms.
I'm quite happy to debate it.
I'm sure you would. I'm sure you would. And I would be happy to chair it as well. No bias.
Oh, no, you've got bias there. I'd be quite happy. You know, what you need to debate it with, Livingston's long gone, but with Corbyn is Natasha Hausdorff.
Yeah, we've had Natasha on a couple of times.
I know you have.
And I'm sure tomorrow we'll try and get her on again, because she is incredible at all of this.
And the other person who's not Jewish is, of course, Douglas Murray.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd like to see Corbyn or anybody debate that. When it comes to sort of controlling or doing something about extremists, as you say, they're not Muslims, they're Islamists. I think Muslims are frightened to speak up because their own community, they're frightened of their own community.
Yeah.
But one of the problems is nobody's done anything for 2 years in controlling the Palestine Solidarity Campaign hate marches, which are happening almost weekly. And the first one was, 2 days after October the 7th?
Yes.
Can't remember. It was really as quick as that.
Yeah.
So,
there was even one on the same evening after the Manchester synagogue attack.
Oh, yeah, the police asked them to...
yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing. They asked them. They asked them nicely. Yeah. They should start. That's when you want Starmer at the front door of Downing Street saying, right, whoever's going on this march, you ain't going on a march because it's not happening. But we don't hear that. And I know the thing about free speech, Adrian, is, it's delicate and you've got to balance it. However, you sometimes need a big, tough voice on these matters.
You need a Donald Trump for that, who cuts through all the rubbish, worries about the legalities afterwards. So one of the reasons I think they don't do it, and what they should be doing is, one, either prescribe or limit PSC, find out who's sponsoring them, because it must be costing them an awful lot of money, all those placards, arranging things, etc., etc. Who are the printers of all these banners and posters and things like that? You could put a block on them, certainly hold Ben Jamal and Chris Nineham, or whatever his name is, to account, but they won't do it. And my opinion is why they won't do it is every member, every union in the UK supports the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, and Mike Lynch and his successor speak and talk at them. The other thing they should do is the Speaker should be coming down very heavily on the Gaza MPs, certainly the guy who's still digging his heels in with the Birmingham Maccabi ban.
Yeah.
That is absolutely disgraceful. He shouldn't be an MP, and he'll dig in, but the only thing to do is censor him. I mean, what's his name? Starmer did exactly expel. He has expelled Zara Sultana. He has expelled Jeremy Corbyn. I think he's done John McDonnell as well. But they still stand up in Parliament using parliamentary privilege to actually create violence and hatred towards the Jewish community. As everybody's been saying, it's us first. Who's next?
What sort of world are we living in when you've got democratically elected MPs standing up and essentially backing Hamas? I mean, how is this even a thing in our lifetimes?
It baffles me, but you've even got Australian MPs wearing the keffiyeh. I don't think they do that in Houses of Parliament.
Well, they love it. I don't know what it is, this kind of strange gravity towards, something that is very different, often the antitheses to your own values, and certainly when it comes to a terrorist organisation like Hamas, it's sort of almost largely ignored. They're just freedom fighters who rape and kill thousands of people on an annual basis. It's horrific. Adrian, thank you for that. That's Adrian in southwest France. I'm getting it right. Cliff in Berkshire says, we don't need robots. We need leaders with fire in their belly. Say what you mean and mean what you say. We haven't had that for so long, have we? Where somebody... And you see, I know you have to sometimes be wary of that, and it is the... I can't think what the phrase is. You get the snake oil salesman, you get the kind of Del Boy character, the person bearing gifts and all of that, so they sound good. It's an amazing sell. Wow. Every great con man of our time, when you hear back the stories, was somebody who was able to impart something and people believed it. So there are... You have to treat it, stick a pair of sort of, asbestos-proof oven gloves on when you approach one of those politicians that speaks from the belly. I understand it, but that wouldn't be the case for every one of them. Work it out for yourself, do your own research. You just want to hear some anger, and we've just got used to, over the last God knows how many years, of governing in this kind of, almost like there's a little rule book. You go into, Rishi Sunak handed it over to Keir Starmer and, all right, this is what you do, and then you go and see these people and you all agree on a certain response when you go and meet the French counterpart and Trudeau in Canada and all that. You all agree to it because that way there's less fuss. Retain the status quo. Don't stick your head above the water. Don't appear to be too partisan in one. Always try and appease everybody if you can. And all this old garbage. And that's the problem. We don't want that any longer, I sense. That's not really good philosophical governance. That's just lazy. It's lazy and ultimately counterproductive and dangerous. 0344 499 1000. Let's do, on a lighter note, the Voice of Doom. By the way, Karen says, did you reveal Friday's Voice of Doom? I just remembered, Finn, it's because we didn't do it till about 20 to 4. So we did it late. We did. It went on day one on Friday, and the answer was Nick Clegg. And about 80 people got it right within 1 second. This was Finn, our producer's first attempt at selecting a cryptic voice. He thought, I've got one here, no one will get this. And he selected Nick Clegg. He's just said in my ear, that's defamation. Yeah, it is. It's something. So we've got a new one today. This is The Voice.
Going to be community relations.
Who is that? These are some of the guesses we had. Shabana Mahmood, Home Secretary. Liz Truss. That's it. Can we hear that again?
Going to be community relations.
I think on that last word, relations, there is a Truss-like thing, but it's not her. Yvette Cooper, no. Ruth Kelly, remember Ruth Kelly well, of course, Labour Education Secretary back in the day. No. Jack Straw. Oh, hang on, let's hear it again.
Going to be community relations.
Well, Jack's voice can rise when angry, but it's not Jack Straw. Jessica Toll. Do we know who Jessica Toll is? Whenever we read one out that we don't know, I always assume it's just somebody's mate that they've got. She is an MP, apparently, but it's not her. Rosie Duffield, of course, Canterbury MP, independent now, of course, for her views on gender. Her party didn't like it very much, but she's a great constituency MP. No, it's not Rosie. Justine Greening, former Putney MP. So all the old anorak knowledge is coming out now for the Tories. She was, I think, was she Transport Secretary, I think? Women Inequalities, apparently. I stand corrected. Justine Greening, no. Helen Whatley, Faversham MP. Oh, Justine Greening, well, I got it right. She was Transport. Helen Whatley, no, it's not Helen. I think she now sits in the shadow cabinet, though. So we haven't got a right answer. It means it rolls over to tomorrow. Plus, we need to break as well. 3:25. This is Talk.
and some of these tropes, these anti-Semitic tropes, which I think we'd all thought had gone away with the end of the Nazis in 1945, are suddenly there in large parts of our communities, and they need to be tackled head on. And we need to have actually people standing up to them right across the board and saying that this is wrong and what's being put forwards, and this sort of bastardised ideology is wrong, and this hatred is wrong. And I think it's really important that we recognise that across the board.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
28 minutes after 3 o'clock. Let's go to a call. Laura is in Wiltshire. What have you got for us, Laura? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
I am both terrified and angry about what happened yesterday, and I'm most angry about our establishment and how they are basically not tackling this. I mean, Nick Robinson yesterday tweeted something in amongst a whole load of other things, saying, I urge you to think of the impact on the Muslim and wider community. Why? What has it got to do with them?
Really?
What happened is appalling. And I'm not Jewish. I live in lovely rural Wiltshire. I used to live in Hampstead. I've got lots of Jewish friends. And they are not surprised and totally horrified by what has happened.
Of course.
And this is big bloodshed. This is a big story. But day to day, even not very observant Jews are having a nightmare in this country. I don't care that there aren't very many of them, and that's why we should care more. And I'm appalled, by Starmer. Where's Ed, jumping off a waterfall in this? What Zach Polanski said. It's mad. The whole thing is terrifying, and I'm just at my wit's end as to what the hell I do between now and the next election to stop this happening again, anywhere.
Do we ever stop? Because we asked the question at the beginning of all of this, Laura, what's the West's response to this? And I suppose, rather disappointingly, there is a rather dark reality that there is no response that could guarantee we will stop this happening. Because if you're a nutter and you're hell-bent on carnage and you've somehow dressed that ideology up as God-given and a correct approach to getting your place in heaven or whatever the heck it is, there's no legislation, is there, or any words that can stop a terrorist who's hell-bent on causing carnage?
No, but we could stop encouraging them. We could stop the marches. We could stop all of this now. And, that would be a really, really good first step, wouldn't it?
You'd have thought so. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe somebody, because I want to agree with you, Laura, but I'm just trying to think of what a terror expert might say. If you ban it, it gets worse. Or does it get worse? I don't know.
Well, I don't know, but otherwise, we are saying, let's not put a menorah in the window. Let's not do this. And they are winning. They are winning. And that is not the British spirit. That is not how we do these things. No. And somehow we have got to fight back at this. And I think people are starting to feel a quiet desperation as to what on earth we do. Because actually, I think the government are much, much, much more worried about keeping the quiet majority under wraps. Because if we all really took to the streets and rose up about this, they wouldn't know what to do. So they're much better off appeasing the small minority, which is still, thank goodness, a small minority, than worrying about the rest.
Yeah, absolutely spot on, Laura. Thank you very much indeed for that, Laura in Wiltshire. And of course, the fact that it's a small minority is really of no comfort, because that small minority ultimately is lethal, and the levels of how lethal they are differ from attack to attack. And of course they don't care, because they're not bothered about dying, and that is the greatest danger, to have an enemy who's not bothered about dying. I can't remember what the quote was recently about that, but it is the biggest problem. If you don't care about dying, that is, there is no form of AI, military intelligence or anything that is going to stop that, because you don't care. if you die. That's the point. Even if you don't fire a shot yourself and you die, you still died in battle for your kind of synthetic cause or whatever it might be. But I do think, whilst we can all probably agree that if someone is hell-bent on carnage, whether it's from a religious perspective like this that we've seen in Australia, or we've seen over here in Manchester or in London or wherever, whether it's that or whatever, there is, I think, an environment. You can't stop that necessarily, but we have, I think, created an environment of tacit acceptability of repugnant and unacceptable positions. And I think communities do play a part in that, because whilst I am pretty darn sure the average Muslim would be as condemning of Australia as the average non-Muslim would be, there is almost a graduated law of acceptance down the line. And when you get to the very bottom of it, someone who's a committed terrorist, there'll be someone around will know. And they don't say anything because either they're scared, or they don't say anything because they think, well, he's not really going to do it, but we know it. And then you go up the ladder. So you end up with people who they are aware that in their community, and they're also aware that some people in the community, whether they're imams or preachers or speakers at rallies or at meeting rooms in the dead of night, whatever they happen to be, they're aware that there is that belief system out there. So whilst, of course, you don't blame Islam, that would be anti-intellectual, ridiculous and completely unfair. You also have to be brutal and say, well, somewhere within that wider community, there are people who know. There are the sort of tacit sympathisers. I don't agree with it, but that lot, a phrase we first heard a lot after 9/11, as I remember. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 25 to 4 on Talk. Shane in Bedford says, if we want to start looking for these lunatics, let's start with the 40,000 on the terror watch list. 3,000 of which are so bad they're monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, costing billions. I didn't know that last stat. I mean, that's a horrendous figure. If that is correct, and I've no reason to disbelieve Shane, I do hear these numbers vary from time to time, but I'd be more intrigued as to what 24-hour, 7 days a week monitoring looks like. Does that mean they check in once a day? Does that mean they're followed? Well, they couldn't be individually followed all the time. But yeah, where are those? What do you do with those people? 0344 499 1000. Let's have a look at this story as well. I've been talking about this a little bit throughout the course of the show. Hundreds of shoplifters could evade justice after a legal ruling that hampers private prosecutions. This is according to a warning from ministers. A specialist London team for major retailers have been out there arresting and prosecuting offenders and then securing banning orders. Apparently this approach is now at risk. A Court of Appeal ruling requires private prosecutors to offer cases to the police and the CPS before court, which threatens the whole kind of do-it-yourself scheme unviable. Let's speak with Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector. Good afternoon to you, Mike, as ever. Not entirely new, of course, having private prosecutions. People are, entitled to give it a go. What do you sense has changed here, then? I mean, if a group of retailers want to get together and hire a private security firm, I always thought they're allowed to do that.
Yes, and Dave McKelvey, who's an ex-DCI, he set up My Local Bobby. This is the one of the agencies that does prosecutions, and they've done a fascinating, they've done an excellent job in prosecuting prolific offenders and bringing them to justice.
Yeah.
The problem is now, of course, is that if you have to go to the CPS, it's going to take, it's going to be really delayed. And these trials are being set by the years in advance. So that the consequences is that these, where we would be prosecuting shoplifters and the private prosecutions are working, the shops are going to sack them because they're going to take 1, 2, 3 years to get through the courts.
Yeah, and we've got these cases penciled in for 2030 for some, some cases. And these are Crown Court cases, and I know magistrates' cases are meant to be a little swifter than that. But nonetheless, this was managing to bypass that and still get a semblance of a result, which now we're learning is going to be unacceptable. Who is it unacceptable to?
Well, exactly. This is. I don't know why this ruling has come about. This was working perfectly well. The offenders were being seen that they were being prosecuted. Shops were seeing some justice being done, and there really was a really good job. And I congratulate Dave McKelvey, who's, like I say, just like me, an ex-DCI, who set all this up. But you wonder what these High Court's this ruling is all about. It achieves nothing. No harm has been done to the shops or the victims of this. All that's been done is that prosecutors have been offenders have been prosecuted quickly. And matters have been dealt with. It just seems again that the state likes to have control. They like to have control of it rather than these private prosecutions, and I just think it's a bad thing for everybody concerned.
Yeah, and it was, the curious thing is it was taking the weight, you think the Department of Justice and the Home Office would have gone, hey, this is fantastic, it's taking up the slack, and we've got so many cases in this, and particularly shoplifting, of course, which is out of control, Mike. This was brilliant because it was addressing part of the problem, but of course governments like to be in charge of it, even if it causes them a bigger problem.
Well, and we also had the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Mark Rowley, saying he wanted shops to do more. And here we had shops actually paying for an organisation to do prosecutions, taking away, the police responsibility for it, saving police time. And now it's been put, the kibosh has been put on it. It seems ridiculous to me, but you never know what it gets up to these days.
Indeed. Mike, a couple of other stories here. This is interesting and it will upset many people. I can understand this. Police given the tech to track suspicious car journeys. This is a sort of an AI trial, a find and profile app using ANPR cameras to flag suspicious journeys. Now, they have county lines in mind when they are thinking about this, and I'm sure, if I did a few mad trips between home base and Tesco and then stopping off at Halfords, and I did that too many times a week, that might look a bit mad. I don't think the old Bill are going to be worried about it so much, but this is about catching serious criminality. But it will upset people because it's the very thing that some people warned against, an overreach from the state and an overreach from the police.
Well, it's a bit like CCTV, isn't it, Ian? It was all set up, the idea it would prevent and detect crime, and we'd really like it to happen. If we get mugged or we get attacked, a woman gets raped on the street, we'd like the CCTV to be used effectively. But then what the CCTV is used for is finding people who park in the wrong place or drive in a yellow box junction. So when you're attacked or robbed or raped, the CCTV is not available. As soon as you park on that double yellow line, you can bet your bottom dollar that it will be working. Yeah. So I think most people will accept that ANPR is a very useful thing if you're tracking terrorists or county lines offenders or a murderer across the country. Somebody snatched a child. Sure. But the trouble is, all the time, as you say, it lowers down in this, and you get to, the council checking on, do you live at a certain place because you registered your kid at a certain school, as we're seeing with surveillance laws. So just like facial recognition, all these things are good, but we've got to be very, very careful that the state doesn't abuse them. It should be used for all the right purposes. But the trouble is, once money gets involved, it becomes a very easy thing to do.
Indeed. And on a similar note, just a final story here, Mike, about state overreach. And I think this compromises us all. A call for a ban on balaclavas with a view to stopping things like e-bike issues and all sorts of other things. We know the balaclava is, almost the go-to garment for somebody who wants to do something a bit iffy on the streets, because you can walk around with impunity. Nobody knows who the heck you are. Even one of those facial recognition cameras isn't going to know who you are. But Darlington residents are demanding a ban on this to curb antisocial behaviour and intimidation. One Labour MP is proposing PSPO issuing £100 fines for balaclava wearers with religious face coverings exempted. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky, of course. We don't live in a world where the government tell you what you can wear, but we do live in a world where there are some characters out there who do want to do bad things, and balaclava is their go-to garb when they're out there committing those crimes. Where do you stand on this, Mike?
Well, already the law says an inspector can issue an authority to say that face coverings have to be removed, and if you don't remove it, you can get arrested. So there is law already to deal with this. But the trouble is, of course, what you have is people aren't stupid. So if you stop me wearing a balaclava, I'll put... And I saw some lads at West Croydon Station with the COVID, these paper masks that everybody was forced to wear ridiculously all that time ago. And that people will just say, oh, I'm scared of COVID. Or, I'll put a burqa on, or I've converted to Islam. So the trouble with this, you really got to ban all face coverings. Ban all face coverings, and then it'll be done. Yeah. But as I say, there's a temporary solution, because the local police inspector can say no face coverings, and then people who don't remove them can be arrested. There's a sort of instant solution to some of the problem.
Absolutely bang on. Common sense stuff, but, don't let common sense get in the way of, government bureaucracy, Mike. Listen, thanks for coming on with us as ever, Mike Neville, former Met Police Detective Chief Inspector. Thank you to him. This from Mark, who says, reference our first caller, how should the West respond to Islamist terror? Mark in Norfolk says, we have a global religious war. Make no mistake, a vaccine contains that which brings the illness. In other words, the only people to quell this madness is Islam itself. Until we have Muslims marching against atrocities like the one in Australia, we're going nowhere. And that, it might come to that. I always resisted the idea that it was somehow the average Muslim's responsibility to rise up and say, not in my name. Well, you might say it in conversation or might say it on a phone-in, but the idea that your religion, literally, the governors of your faith, have a responsibility to get out there and say this loud. I always think, well, that's not fair, because, if I don't know, if a milkman became a serial killer, I don't think all milkmen have to stand up and go, it's not all of us, we're all... I know that's a bad example, but you take the point. But now I'm thinking exactly what Mark in Norfolk has just said. I wonder whether you need that, because there's too much of this. I think at the weekend, wasn't there another attack that was stopped in Germany that could have been one of those Christmas market attacks, which seems to be a bit of a kind of totemic target for some of these people? This one from John, who says, Starmer will say he stands with the people. He will also say lessons need to be learned, like he always does. That's always the one, isn't it? Lessons need to be learned. We stand by. Let's light some candles. And Denise says, you referred to the Bondi Beach attack as random, but it wasn't. It was absolutely targeted. Now, what I meant was random as in the people that were being shot, the random nature of spraying a crowd with bullets. Once again, says Denise, Jewish communities are picked out, targeted, and the majority of people around the globe stay silent. It's abhorrent. I'm a Christian. I'm called to love others, but I'm also called to stand for what is right and good. Islam, when followed to the letter, is a religion of violence and hate, says Denise. I think some people wouldn't necessarily agree with that. It's particularly towards Jews and Christians. It is a religion of dominance over women, over people of other faiths. It does not seek to integrate, it seeks to dominate and annihilate. There is nothing good about Islam as such. This is not at all compatible with our values in the UK. We need to take a hard line. Apparently we have many thousands of radical Islamists on the terror watch list. What are they still doing? And where are the decent Muslims in the UK? I have Muslim friends. They too are silent, and their silence is deafening when things like these attacks happen. And on it goes. Dee says, standing with the Jewish people. It reminds me a little bit of when something bad goes on in an institution. We've had it with the police, we've had it with the NHS, and you discover years later that there was not really an overt code of agreement, but clearly a covert code of agreement that you protect the institution. So whatever you do, when we've had abuse within the church, we know that victims were kind of told, well, OK, we'll report the vicar, but we don't want the church really involved. We've got to protect the church, got to protect the NHS. Terrible things have happened. And it's often that, protect the establishment or protect the company or the idea. And I think something similar with this, to agree on this point with Dee, is that there is a sense, and I stand to be corrected, that the silence is deafening because there is a protection, a wider protection of the faith. Whilst condemning, I'm sure if you spoke to those Muslims individually, they would go, of course I condemn it, it was horrendous. But there is still almost a sense that there is a code of silence. I said the word sense way too many times there, but you take the point. Perceptions, reality, and all the rest of it. 0344 499 1000. The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We are actually going to talk about that point that was raised by, it was Dee who contacted me in the West Midlands. About diversity, I think there's more than one politician that has literally gone there in the last sort of 24 hours. To use that phrase, Sadiq Khan loves saying diversity is our strength, doesn't he? And it's almost completely vacuous. It doesn't really mean anything at all. It just sounds like you're meant to sound like a nice person. It also doesn't mean diversity is our enemy. It doesn't mean any of those things. It doesn't mean anything in itself. You can't just stand that up there and say, hey, that's all right, because diversity is our strength. And of course, the smart guess says, well, diversity at best is probably neutral. There's nothing intrinsic within the notion of diversity that adds strength to it. It might add some knowledge to things. It might add some understanding. So strength is a curious, massive phrase to wheel out. But when we have situations that do divide us, unarguably divide us, you are forced to question that notion of diversity and strength. We're definitely going to look at that tomorrow on the programme. Let's talk to Ashley down in London. On events in Bondi yesterday. Ashley, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian. Look, I mean, we as a Jewish community, we've been talking about this for a long time, and we feel that these marches, people are entitled to do what they want, but the language, the rhetoric, we're told, oh, it's a nuance, it's not, you can't, don't take it, it means many different things. Well, to us, Jewish community, a lot of what gets said does mean something. We're brought up from an early age to understand what happened to our families in the Holocaust, right? Mm-hmm. And what's happened since the 7th of October is that there are communities out there, people out there that have tried to equate what's happening over in the Middle East to the Holocaust, and actually what's happening now is far worse, which is diminishing the fact that 50% of our community were murdered because of who we are. And it's clearly going to be very sensitive to us. And sure. we have, I'll give you a great example. On one of the local authority Facebook pages, they put on a Happy Hanukkah, and we're standing with our Jewish community at this hard time. And the comments that have been made, one specific one was, well, I haven't seen you say anything about people starving in Gaza and Ramadan. I don't see why we're having to say anything about this. And you're like, and this is the kind of thing that we're up against. We can't have any sympathy. We can't have anyone saying that what's happened to us and our people is bad, because allegedly we're evil, bad people, which it's become alien. I'm 53 years old, and it's the first time that I have properly experienced in my lifetime a period where I'm actually sitting there and going, my God, are all these people against us, right? We've just had 15 people shot, 15 people die because they are Jews, not because they, whether they support Israel or don't support Israel or believe that what's going on is good or bad or ugly, right? Yeah. Because they were celebrating a Jewish festival, they were murdered, yet we seem to have to justify our existence. And I'm sorry to say it, but the Islamic community, right, not all Muslims at all, but a lot of people, their view is that their faith comes before anything else, and every other religion and every other faith don't really count, because theirs is the faith that should be followed. Yeah. And there summarises the problem. Jews have always been have always integrated. Christians integrate into society, Hindus, lovely communities, and lots of Muslims as well. But there are those within those communities which, if you shout out about them, you're called a racist because you're calling them out for, in my view, I would, if they want to call me racist because I think I don't agree with their view, then whatever. But they've actually nullified the word racist to the extent that you can't. That word gets used so much now. About everything apart from actually what is genuinely racist.
Correct.
So,
yes, that's absolutely bang on. I see it said so often when somebody, talks about culture and they're written, oh, you are a racist. Not even somebody who's made an accidental racist comment or a comment that might be interpreted. No, you are intrinsically a racist, like right up there. And of course, it's anti-intellectual nonsense. Ashley, I've got to step in for no other reason. I know I always use that phrase, but we've literally hit the clock. We are going to pick this up again tomorrow, though, particularly on the point that you raised about anti-Semitism. Peter Cardwell is here after the news at 4. I know he's going to be looking clearly deeper again into this horrendous story out of Australia. Peter.
Yes, certainly we did 3 hours on it yesterday, and there's so much more. There's so much detail coming out about the victims, about the hero, of course, who wrestled the gun off the gunman as well. The mother as well, the wife of the gunman and the mother of the other gunman. They were father and son, of course, saying he's a good boy. I mean, he's not. We'll talk as well about the politics of the day. Labour admitting the small boats plan is not working. 40,000 migrants crossing the Channel this year. We'll also talk about, there's a big story coming at 5 o'clock I can't tell you about just at the moment because it's embargoed, but I will tell you at 5. And thousands of people marching in Crowborough for the 6th Sunday in a row to protest against 600 migrants moving into army barracks there. We'll also talk about Russia and Ukraine with Chris Parry and about and to Israel's international spokesman at the United Nations as well about Bondi. He spent a lot of time there. Also, who would Santa